A long time ago, the world was in chaos. The demons ran around killing everyone, leaving the humans in despair. Desperate for help, they cried to the sun god Sola, who took pity on them. He released a beam of his light, birthing the child of the sun who could overcome the darkness. The world tree, Gaia, also had mercy on the humans, and after snapping her branches, birthed the child of the forest. The two worked together to get rid of the darkness, saving countless lives and were hailed as heroes. They created the Lazepo Empire, and while the Sun Child was made the king, the Forest Child was given the title of Grand Witch. Everyone thought the two would always protect the empire, until one day the Grand Witch disappeared. Over at Piron, a small village at the Lazepo borders, a girl in a clown mask is telling this story to a group of children. The kids reply that the Grand Witch Arbonne is living in the forest of mazes next to their village. While they haven't seen her, they have all met her little apprentice, Ursala. Their conversation is overheard by a red-eyed man in a cloak who immediately stops one of the kids and asks for more details. Meanwhile, over at the Grand Witch's house, poor Ursala is about to scream herself to death. Arbonne is startled by her apprentice's action and wonders why she keeps sighing. The girl confesses that she is tired of memorizing these magic formulas. She has already done that thousands of times and believes she only needs to practice. Arbonne is already used to the girl's complaints, so Ursala changes the topic. She asks why the witch took her in when her magic is so slow. She even failed 4 out of the 7 times she tried to use them. Arbonne insists that the girl has the potential to become a grand mage. While she can find thousands of people who use small magic in the city, Ursala is the only one in this world with great magical powers. Our heroine is amazed, but the witch advises her to stop whining or else she might ruin her once-in-a-year magic. The girl still believes she needs more experience, but the witch says she lacks desperation. After fondling her apprentice's cheeks, she reveals that what Ursala needs is a special trigger. She prophesizes that the girl will meet a hungry golden lion who she must help with all her strength. Ursala isn't pleased with this prophecy as it makes her even more frustrated. She can't understand her master's mysterious words because helping a hungry lion will only put her in danger. The next day, a group of men in cloaks arrive at the Forest of Mazes. They seem to be looking for the Grand Witch for their master's sake and soon spot the mysterious cottage. Ursala is dozing in bed when she is suddenly startled awake by a loud knock. She is prepared to confront the rude visitors but immediately becomes meek when she sees the giant men. The guards are excited to see the witch, thinking she must be the famous Arbonne, but their hopes are destroyed when Ursala calls herself the apprentice. She reveals that her master is on a journey which might take several days or even months. Our heroine is still annoyed by the men's rude behavior, but when she tries to shut the door, one of the men suddenly grabs the handle. He reasons that since she is the Grand Witch's apprentice, she must also be powerful. Ursala, filled with a desire to show off, immediately swings the door open. She replies that she is the witch's only apprentice who will one day become a grand mage. The guards are amazed, and when they ask if she can use strong magic, she replies that she can. Ursala is still feeling smug until she sees the men exchanging weird glances. She instantly has a bad feeling, but it is too late as her screams fill the air. The poor mage is forced into the carriage and cries as she hides in a corner. She scolds the men for kidnapping her, but the culprits show no remorse, even saying this a top secret. While Ursula secretly prays for her master to save her, she says the men should at least tell her the reason for her kidnap. It isn't like she is going to see the emperor or something. Well, talk about jinxing oneself. When the men finally arrive at their destination, Ursala realizes that she is indeed meeting the emperor. The king scolds his men for being rough, and they apologize for frightening the mage. Ursala also apologizes for scratching their faces, saying they could have revealed that they were meeting the emperor. She pays her respect to the king, introducing herself as the Grand Witch's only apprentice. The king can't hide his doubt, making Ursala desperate to prove her identity. She takes off her hat to take a proper look at the king, only to see a huge golden lion standing behind his seat. The girl is startled because her master's prophecy has come to pass. Ursula realizes with a start that the king is indeed the golden lion. Carlos still has some doubts about her identity, but the guards step in to testify. They believe Ursala is the real deal because she was found in the Forest of Mazes, which they could never enter before. Meanwhile, the girl still can't believe the emperor is her trigger. She steals another glance at him, noticing how he shines like a golden lion. Just as her master said, there is no way she would miss his identity. Ursula recalls the other part of the prophecy about being hungry and takes another look at the king. She immediately notices a dark aura around him, which signifies a terrible curse which will slowly wilt him to death. Carlos is curious about her abilities, but the pretty witch suddenly declares that she will lift his curse. The guards are all impressed, since she could notice his curse with just a look. Meanwhile, the king only calls her bold. The girl insists that she can cure his curse, so he smirks, asking her to keep her promise. Ursala, determined to cure the curse immediately, pulls out her magical staff. She is even willing to use her most powerful magic, which will drain all the mana she has spent a year gathering. The guards are all amazed as they watch the girl release her zodiac magic. She is just so eager to save the poor captive lion. Ursala's magic takes her to a strange place where she sees the door to the curse. She thinks her job would be easy since the gate is so small, but she is in for a surprise. When she opens the door with her staff, she arrives at the palace ballrooms. The girl is amazed at first until she realizes the problem. The place is filled with so many people, so it would be hard to find the one who cursed the king. Ursula takes a look around and overhears some girls talking about the first empress of Lezeppo. She realizes that this must be the first generation of the Lezeppo Empire. Indeed, our heroine has returned to the past where she sees Alexander, the first king of Lezeppo and the Sun Child. He is enjoying the company of some pretty ladies when the people around suddenly have disgusted expressions. They seem to be pointing at a new arrival, who they believe is a disgusting witch. Ursula notices the commotion and is sure she has found the woman who placed the curse. Alexander also looks annoyed by the witch's presence and even calls her dirty and ugly. The woman proudly says she has come to be the king's empress, but all she receives are cruel words from the king. Alexander looks down on her, and when she says she only needs his love, he even laughs in her face. His attendants follow suit, all mocking the little witch. The woman isn't upset as she presents a beautiful flower before the king. She calls it the fragrance of love, but Alexander isn't interested. He disdains the smell and orders his guards to drag the witch away. The two seem to have some history because the witch suddenly gets furious, accusing him of forgetting about the fragrance. Alexander is stunned, but it is too late as the girl is already laying a curse. Since he has betrayed a forest spirit's love, she curses him to have a stench forever, which will only be broken when he falls hopelessly in love. She even extends the curse to all his descendants, and the magic grabs the king like an evil claw. The guards surround the witch, but when they try to attack, she suddenly turns into a fragrant flower. The emperor soon discovers a foul stench which seems to be following everyone. He pushes the maids away, demanding that they find the witch no matter what. Ursula finally understands how the curse started, but still thinks her job is easy. She notices her decreasing mana, yet somehow thinks it would be enough to break such a strong curse. She releases her magic, which destroys the cursed door, leaving the guards amazed. Ursula believes she has done something and rushes to the king's side, eager to know how he feels. The guards all look expectant, only for Carlos to say nothing is different. The king can't hide his disappointment as he says he never expected anything much. Ursula can feel her pride crumbling to pieces and can't hide the shocked look on her face. The guards watch with disappointment as she yells that she truly broke the curse. Carlos, furious with her lies, suddenly raises his hands, declaring that she is to be killed. Our heroine's soul almost leaves her body as she screams in fear. She turns to the guards for help, begging the king to give her another chance. Our poor girl still has a lot to live for. Her comical actions make the king laugh, and he reveals that he was just joking. He asks his closest aide to pay her off and send her home while he prepares to leave. Ursula can't believe the man was just playing with her emotions and feeling annoyed, glares at his departing back. Evelyn interrupts her staring contest, handing her a non-disclosure agreement to prevent her from spilling their secrets. None of them notice Carlos stepping outside or turning around with an astonished expression. The king rushes back inside, grabbing Ursula and stopping her from leaving. He announces that he can smell grass, which leaves the girl confused. While she is still in shock, he starts sniffing her out like a rabid dog, almost giving his assistant a heart attack. Ursula finally registers the news, becoming happy because she thinks her plan worked. The king watches her with a strange gaze and begins a weird ritual of walking back and forth. After several tries, he announces that the girl succeeded, which makes our heroine very happy. Unfortunately, her joy is cut short as the king says she only succeeded partly. The horrible stench from the curse only disappears when she is around. He grips Ursula's shoulders in excitement, asking her to break the rest of the curse. His subordinates are filled with joy, and the dramatic Evelyn even gets on his knees. They keep begging Ursula, which only makes the girl turn pale in fear. You see, there is a little problem. Our heroine can only use the zodiac magic once a year. She explains this problem to the clingy Carlos and his assistant in a meeting. Our heroine has to collect mana from all 12 star signs before she can break the curse again. Since she is very slow at gathering magic, she mustn't use her powers during this period. She offers to come back after a year and break the rest of the curse, but Carlos refuses to let her go. Ursula insists that she has to go back to train and wait for her master, but her words suddenly turn the harsh emperor into a fragile princess. He leans against the table like a suffering beauty, saying he will be eaten away by the curse without her by his side. The mage recalls her master's words to help the golden lion with all her strength. She notices his sad look and can't imagine how hard it is to live with a disgusting stench. Ursula's soft heart weakens and she finally agrees to stay in the palace for a year. Carlos instantly regains his vigor, causing the assistant to also praise her decision. Evelyn offers to draw up a contract while the king wants Ursula to stay with him all day. The girl immediately protests, imagining herself sharing a room with the king. Carlos thinks this is a good idea, but Ursula vows not to sign the contract. He immediately says he is joking, but Evelyn can tell his boss is totally serious. The two persuade Ursula to state her terms so they can include them in the contract. Since she is with the king, it is time to take as much as she can. Unfortunately, our heroine has no desires, which startles even the assistant. He keeps mentioning money or titles, but Ursula's only desire is to become a grand mage. She doesn't need material things like money or status and tells the king not to worry about a contract. The stubborn men insist on drafting a few rules and promise to give Ursula a total of 100 gold, which is about $800,000. The girl almost faints when she sees the amount while the king asks her to think it over. Ursula is taken to the Sherha castle, which will be her residence from now on. The mage has just revealed her disdain for material things, yet totally loses herself when she sees the delicious meal. She is even given a luxurious bath and a smooth body massage, which leaves her drooling. Ursula, dressed up in designer gowns and beautiful jewelry, is served a bunch of fancy desserts. She has no idea that this is the king's seduction plan and is totally amazed by the sight. Carlos notices the girl's distraction and urges her to sign the contract. Poor Ursula, obsessed with her dessert, doesn't even go through the contract again and just signs her life away. The king can't hide his smug grin, causing Evelyn to feel pity for the innocent magician. The poor girl is busy enjoying the dessert while secretly admitting that material things are really the best. Chapter 4. The next morning, Ursula is still dreaming about her dessert when she hears someone screaming her name. The girl wakes up only to see some maids standing around her bed. She yawns in surprise, but the head maid suddenly claps and with a harsh stare, orders Ursula to pull herself together. She tells the mage that, from now on, her only existence is to serve the master. Our heroine is still in shock, but she is suddenly pulled out of bed and given the uniform of the palace's mages. She is dragged outside with the rest of the staff to wait for the king's arrival. Ursula wonders where Carlos is coming from since this is supposed to be the main palace. Lady Jane explains that the king lives in the emperor's palace, which is separate from their residence. Only a few people can enter his building. Ursula sighs in pity because she thinks the king is avoiding too many people because of the horrible stench. Just then, the door opens, announcing the king's arrival. Everyone bows their heads to give their greetings, while Ursula copies their movements. She can feel the pressure from the approaching king and thinks to herself that he is really the emperor. Suddenly, Carlos stops right in front of her, causing a giant question mark to appear on our girl's head. His guards are also confused by his strange behavior, but the king only sighs in response. He finally resumes walking, and the head maid pushes Ursula out to walk by Evelyn's side. Our heroine dashes to the assistant's side and the two exchange greetings. She is still cautious because of the head maid's warning and has to ask Evelyn if she can speak to him. The man tells her not to be nervous, stating that Lady Jane had always been strict. Still, he advises Ursula to only talk to him because there are many people watching. The mage follows the group to a large meeting hall, but she has to wait outside, since she isn't allowed into the room. Time passes by, and our heroine, who at first was sitting upright, is now lying lazily on the couch. Our poor girl is about to die from boredom. She even asks a guard, eager to know when the meeting would end, but the man also has no idea. Ursula isn't one to sit still and soon runs off to play somewhere else. After all, her presence isn't really needed. She takes a tour around the beautiful palace and finally ends up under a shady tree in the garden. Our heroine is clearly feeling better because she even has the courage to think about having a picnic tomorrow. She falls asleep on the spot, but soon finds herself having a strange dream. A woman with white hair keeps calling her name, but just as she is about to reveal her face, our heroine suddenly wakes up. Ursula, still feeling confused, notices a dark figure looming over her. She questions the stranger who turns out to be the king himself. Ursula is frightened, but she can't be more worried than the king's desperate guards. The knights rush over, begging their lord not to run off again. They are shocked when they see the cold Carlos leaning over a startled Ursula. The girl immediately acts cute, apologizing for slacking off, but the king isn't offended. Instead, he offers her his hand, asking her to eat lunch with him. Once again, our heroine can't hide her love for material things, especially the palace's delicious food. Carlos comments on her happy appearance, and she replies that the food is delicious. She thinks the king is also having a feast, but when she glances at his plate, all she sees is some plain cooked chicken. The mage is confused by the simple meal, but Carlos says food is just like fuel to him. He changes the topic, mentioning to Ursula that he plans to hold the annual spring ball. The program, which was supposed to happen every year, hasn't been held for the past 3 years. Our heroine has heard about the famous banquet of love and flowers, a ball protected by the sun god. The rumors say anyone who passes the trial of the flowers during the spring ball would have an eternal love that lasts for a lifetime. Ursula is daydreaming about the romantic banquet when the king suddenly releases a bomb. He asks her to attend the ball as his partner, making our heroine fall into a sea of chaos. Ursula replies that she is a commoner and usually only lovers attend the ball as partners. Carlos says he would introduce her as an important magician, which will allow her to attend as his business partner. He promises that nothing will happen and no one will misunderstand, which makes Ursula finally agree. The day of the spring ball arrives, and the happy nobles can't hide their excitement. Some of the ladies even assume that the king is ready for marriage. They speculate about his partner, thinking it will be a lady called Shuel. They are already jealous of the lucky girl who will be chosen by the flowers. Just then, the servants announce the king's arrival with his partner, leaving the nobles shocked. They are curious about Ursula, so Carlos introduces her as his very important guest. He reveals her identity as a mage and, with a threatening glare, orders his people to welcome her. The nobles watch with frightened faces as Ursula gives a bow. Our heroine isn't expecting a public address, but, thankfully, the terrified nobles still welcome her warmly. She is afraid her performance was poor, but Carlos assures her that she was perfect. He mentions that she has to stay by his side to avoid troublesome situations, which makes our heroine curious. Carlos, who has hidden the truth all along, finally reveals that she is in danger. His maternal family might try to get rid of her if they think she is his lover. Our heroine is shocked to hear about her impending death and blames the king for skipping that topic. The man playfully taps her hat, assuring her that no one would think that way. He even dressed her up in a childish costume to get rid of any suspicions. Unfortunately, his plan fails because some girls are already doubting Ursula's identity. Since the king has never introduced anyone this way, they are certain the pretty girl is more than a mage. The king drags Ursula along to greet a few nobles, but they meet one who openly shows his hostility. He glares at Ursula, blaming Carlos for leaving his daughter and bringing along some pretty mage. Our heroine shudders in fear, hiding behind the king who also protects his partner. He says Ursula is just a palace mage and accuses Narda of doubting his words. The duke changes the topic with a laugh and the two continue their discussion. Ursula turns away, feeling the men are too scary. She is distracted by the sight of some desserts and chases after the waiter. Our heroine is enjoying her food when she suddenly hears a mean voice calling her vulgar. The ladies, feeling jealous, resort to mocking Ursula, calling her a lowly commoner. Our heroine turns around in anger but recalls the king's warning to stay calm. She tries to comfort herself, but the mean girls keep calling her names. Just as she is about to explode, a soft voice warns the girls to back off. The famous Shuel appears, reminding the girls to show Ursula some respect because she is the king's special guest. The girls claim they were just joking, but Shuel threatens to repeat their jokes to the king. The ladies tremble in fear, even begging Ursula to forgive them. Our heroine is still confused as she watches the mean girls run away. She is nearly blinded as the pretty Shuel begs her not to be angry. She thanks the girl for her help and the maiden introduces herself as Chuel Narda. Our heroine is still complimenting the girl's beauty when her smile suddenly fades away. She recalls the frightening duke she just met before, realizing that he must be Shuel's father. Ursula can't understand how a demon could birth such a pretty angel. Chuel mentions that the palace has never employed a mage like her and says Ursula must be really amazing. Our heroine immediately boasts about being a genius, revealing that her master is the Grand Witch Arbonne. Shuel plays along with her, clapping and asking for details about her magic. Ursula is about to reveal everything when she is suddenly stopped by a hand. The king appears, sharing a few greetings with Shuel. He casually praises her beauty, but the girl instantly reveals a shy expression. Ursula glances at the two in confusion, but Carlos is already pulling her away. He warns the girl not to stray too far, and she apologizes. The mage has a naughty look on her face, as she mentions the ambiguous air between the couple. The king isn't ashamed to admit that he almost got engaged to Shuel a long time ago. Ursula can't hide her surprised expression as she assumes that the two have dated before. Her eyes become sparkly with joy as she imagines a wild imperial romance. Carlos burst her bubbles, explaining that they were never lovers. The Narda family is a maternal relative of the imperial family. Because they had riches and power that few could compare to, the royal family had chosen their daughter for a strategic marriage. In other words, our dear king has no affection for Shuel. Ursula is a bit disappointed because it isn't like the stories she has read in the fairy tales. Suddenly, the light disappears as the ballroom becomes draped in darkness. The crowd murmur in fear, trying to figure out what is going on while Carlos announces that it is finally beginning. Just as we are about to die of curiosity, a speck of mud appears on the ballroom floor. It slowly grows, taking the shape of the evil green-eyed witch who cursed the first king. The people scream in fear, retreating from the gigantic demon, and only calm down when the guards explain that it is just a show. Ursula is also amazed, asking if the spring banquet is always so exciting. Carlos replies that the show changes every year and is sure his men must have worked really hard this time. Our heroine is sure it is illusion magic and praises the palace magicians. Meanwhile, the demon begins her tale with a story about a fragile flower. The flower, noble and beautiful, was loved by the gods until one day a man found it. He took the flower away, using its power to achieve all his wishes. He craved to become wealthy and victorious, and the flower gave him everything he wanted. But instead of being grateful, one day the scumbag pulled out the flower, handing it over to his future bride as a gift. The demon finishes her tale with a question, asking the crowd why the man pulled the flower. The people soon realize that this is a riddle. An eager man says the king wanted to make his woman happy, but the demon calls his answer wrong. She even rewards him with a splash of mud. The rest of the crowd laugh at the dirty man, so the demon picks one to answer the question. Unfortunately, his answer is wrong and he also receives a face of mud. The scenario keeps repeating until more people are covered in dirt. The rest of the people become reluctant to answer, which Ursula notices. She tells Carlos that the people are afraid, but the man thinks it's funny to splash them with mud. No wonder he is still single. The mage points out that no one is laughing and a few are even crying. She can't understand why they are so desperate to answer, until Carlos reveals that the winner will make their love come true. Unfortunately, Ursula isn't listening because she sees the demon asking Lady Chuel. Unwilling to see her goddess tainted with mud, our heroine rushes out to stop the demon. She protects Chuel, yelling that she knows the answer. Ursula suggests that the man didn't love the flower, which is why he betrayed it. She even feels sorry for the poor flower and sheds a few tears. The demon shrinks into a human size, and after handing Ursula a pretty flower, it disappears. Our heroine is still holding her bouquet and feeling sorry when Carlos approaches. She apologizes for acting on her own, to which the man replies that she has caused a lot of trouble. The mage is still confused, but the people around are already clapping. They call the two the lovers of the spring, causing the king to sigh. Now things have really become troublesome. The next day, the newspapers broadcast the news about a mage becoming the emperor's spring lover. Ursula reads through the papers, noticing that the chance of becoming lovers is about 83.28%. Out of the 299 couples, about 249 have actually gotten married. The poor girl is frightened by the statistics and yells at the king for making her his partner. Carlos defends himself, saying he also asked her to stay still. He calls the banquet a superstition until Ursula shoves the papers in his face. She blames the king for not taking his lover along and complains that since he can't date her, she would never be able to find a husband. Carlos calmly sips his tea as he listens to her rant, making Ursula recall the ridiculous words she just said. Our heroine blushes in shame and quickly tries to change the topic. She can't understand how they became lovers when she went through the spring trials alone. Besides, she remembers that people like Shuel had no partners. Evele explains that those are the rules of the trial. If someone without a partner wins the game, they can gift the flower to the person they love. Of course, the receiver can't refuse the flower, so they would be forced to become spring lovers. But if the person already has a partner, the winner can only ask for one date. Ursula is about to die of anger as she recalls Chuel's determination. It turns out the king was just using her as a shield. She yells at the culprit who is sipping his tea, reminding him that she could get killed by his relatives. Carlos shows no remorse, even saying that it couldn't be helped. He insists that he only wanted to introduce her to the public and never expected such a bigger mess to occur. He even asks Evele to include some etiquette lessons for Ursula, suggesting that it is all her fault for having no manners. Our heroine is about to die of despair when the king suddenly vows to protect her. She blushes but tries to cover it up by referring to their contract. Carlos urges her not to worry, but just then a frown mars his face. Evele notices the king's empty teacup, but when he tries to bring more tea, Carlos refuses. With a sad look, he replies that this is the last of Ursula's tea. The mage knows that the king really likes her tea, but her tea leaves have truly finished. She assumes that the rosemary tea must be really rare, but Evele says they have a lot in the palace. Ursula can't understand why the king is obsessed with her leaves until he admits that her tea is special. For the first time, he can't feel the curse from it. Our heroine recalls the king's pitiful meal, realizing that the curse also affects his food. She can't imagine such a nightmare and wants to know how it feels. Carlos explains that the food always tastes like trash, and the more elaborate it is, the worse it tastes. He suddenly grins, trying to make a joke of his condition, but it only makes Ursula more upset. The king is always surrounded by people, which means he can't escape that horrible stench. Indeed, it's such a cruel curse. The mage covers her face in pain, blaming herself for neglecting her duties. The men are startled by her sudden look of despair and assure her that it isn't her fault. The cold king even pats her adorable head, afraid the girl might really end up crying. The next moment, Ursula looks up with red eyes, vowing to help her master. Our heroine is really eager to begin her mission and starts off by giving the men a mini lesson about the curse. She discovers that the stench returns when the king is 10 meters away from her. Right now, only the air is purified, which means he can still feel the effect of the curse through his meals. Since the purified air gives off a special fragrance, he can easily find Ursula anywhere she goes. Our heroine has also made another secret discovery. The food she makes with her own hands doesn't have a stench. But there is also a problem. Even the ingredients can't be handled by anyone else. Therefore, our heroine requests a new mission. She wants to begin a lifetime of farming. The men immediately reject her ridiculous idea, with Carlos saying she can just stay by his side. Ursula insists on helping, revealing that the king's body has now become very weak. She wants to know the last time he had a proper meal, so Carlos admits he had pancakes when he was 10. He is now 27, which means he hasn't eaten a proper meal for 17 years. Ursula reminds the men that she is from the countryside and is already used to farming. She advises them not to look down on her and is determined to fatten up the king. First, she has to fulfill her first mission, which is to give Carlos some pancakes. The king is still in shock, but the eager Evele is ready to prepare everything she needs. Carlos points out that the girl is just a magician, but Ursula urges him to trust her. Since she can only use magic once a year, she has to do everything she can to help the king. Soon, our heroine meets her future teachers, Johnny the farmer, Jean the chef, and Lessa the etiquette teacher. This will be her new schedule for the next month. Ursula begins her life of farming, feeling grateful that the stench can only be absorbed by living things. Otherwise, things like simple farm tools will also be useless. She has discovered that the stench can go away after being circulated, which means it is fine to feed the chicken some grains grown by others. The curse can also fade over time, so food stored for over a year will be free from the stench. Ursula is glad because she doesn't have to worry about the grains and is only concerned about the meat. She had prepared a chicken cage, but while she can catch some eggs, She has no experience in killing a chicken. The girl resumes her farm work, feeling grateful that the curse has some loophole. Just then, Johnny arrives with a loud greeting. He feels pity for poor Ursala, but looking at the "Do Not Enter" sign, he knows he can't come in. Ursala is also worried that he might taint the farm with the stench, so she advises him to keep away. She stands up, prepared to call it a day, but her back aches in protests. Johnny is busy showing his sympathy when they notice a figure waiting for them while sipping some tea. The strict-looking Jane has appeared again. Ursala is unsettled because the lady-in-waiting seems more like a secret spy. She turns to Johnny, asking him to accompany her to the market. Ursala has barely finished her sentence when Jane appears by her side, offering to follow. The mage feels uncomfortable, explaining that she only needs some magic ingredients. Still, the stubborn maid insists on following, and our helpless heroine has to agree. She comments that the maid looks more like a knight, to which Jane secretly thinks that she has good instincts. Ursala heads off to change, but the stubborn Jane still insists on following. She even takes off the girl's clothes herself, but finds nothing suspicious. Just as Ursala guessed, Jane is actually a spy planted by the Emperor into the palace. She thinks Ursala is a very cute and lovely person, but that only makes her more suspicious of the mage. This time, she even offers to bathe the girl personally. Our pitiful heroine can't escape her sad fate, and the three finally head off to the market. They arrive at a store with Ursala looking every inch like a glamorous princess. The stubborn Jane had really spent a lot of effort in dressing her up. Still, Ursala's appearance can't be hidden, and the store owner immediately recognizes her as the spring lover. The mage is surprised that he knows her identity until the man reveals that everyone in the city is talking about her these days. He even pulls out the papers, showing that almost 90% of the people have seen her pictures. Ursala finally understands why so many people had stared at her during their journey. She feels embarrassed because she had naively thought they were just staring at her dress. The store owner asks for an autograph, and even though Ursala refuses, she is still forced to sign one. The three return home with Johnny curious to know what she bought. The mage recites a list of ingredients which even includes some unicorn poop. She calls it a growth potion and plans to mix the drug into the plants. Johnny is still in doubt, but Ursula insists that the potion can make the plants harvest 4 times earlier. She prepares the potion while the farmer watches in amazement. Meanwhile, Jane is just worried that the mage is making some kind of dark potion. Our heroine stores it all in a jar and heads off to sprinkle it on the fields. Even though it takes almost a lifetime, Ursala finally finishes her work. Her companions are still in doubt until they spot a green sprout bursting out of the soil. A tiny green sprout bursts from the soil, proving that Ursala's disgusting potion might actually be effective. Johnny nearly loses his mind with shock and screams in pure disbelief. Behind him, miss. Jane also stands frozen in surprise. The farmer yells over the fence at Ursala, proclaiming that her success is absolutely revolutionary. He even sheds some dramatic tears, suggesting that everyone should know about this method. It could totally wipe out famine and save struggling farmers. Ursala quickly pops his balloon with a sheepish smile, explaining that the magical method is too expensive to be used on a wide scale. Jane, feeling doubtful, looks over the receipt and nearly faints when she sees the outrageous price. The total rounds up to a whopping 12 gold, which is about $90,000. Poor Johnny, whose salary is only 4 gold, can't believe his ears. Jane asks where she learnt this method, but Ursula replies that she read it in a book. The lady-in-waiting reluctantly praises her intelligence, while the stubborn mage insists that she is a genius. The harmonious days pass by as Ursala goes through loads of different lessons. She even succeeds in making an egg for the king, even though half of it ends up burnt. Our heroine might be a terrible chef, but at least she is quite a fast learner. A month passes by as her little field keeps growing. Johnny is excited because in just another month, they will be able to harvest the produce. Ursala is also eager to prepare more meals for the king. The three friends retire for some tea where Jane announces that the mage is too talented to be a farmer. She even reveals that people have spread good words about Ursala, leaving the girl in shock. Yet, the next moment she becomes arrogant, demanding to know the people who recognized her genius. She is happy when she hears that the strict chef also gave her some praise. Johnny doesn't miss a chance to flatter Ursala, and even though Jane doesn't say a word, she is also impressed. The mage is hardworking, gets along with the maids, and learns very quickly. She even lifted a curse which troubled the royals for 500 years. Jane knows her boss really needs this girl, so she gives a formal bow, thanking Ursala for her help. Suddenly, the serene moment is shattered when a fiery, red-haired boy named Arta Swagan arrives. Ursula greets him politely, but she is met with the cruel nickname, Quack Magician. The arrogant mage instantly explodes, but Arta points out that she failed her mission and is now farming. This sharp insult makes Ursala totally furious, and the two begin a fierce verbal battle as she tries to defend her abilities. Arta is accusing Ursala of trying to mooch off the king, when Jane suddenly looms over him with a dark expression. She cuts the chaos short by grabbing Arta by his collar and dragging him away, leaving his dramatic screams echoing into the sky. Arta soon returns with a large bump on his head, and under Jane's strict supervision, offers a deep bow. He presents a massive sandwich loaded with delicious homemade ham as an apology. Ursala's anger instantly disappears at the sight of the food, She eagerly accepts the peace offering and takes a massive bite. Just as peace seems fully restored, Arta proves that he simply can't help himself. He secretly whispers to Ursula, calling her a fat fraud, and our heroine immediately loses her mind again. Arta makes a funny face to tease Ursula while she stuffs her mouth with the giant sandwich. The mage completely ignores him because the food is just too good. She falls into food heaven, only regaining her senses after finishing the sandwich and licking away the remaining crumbs. Jane is pleased to see her little friend eating so well, and Ursula happily agrees that the food was delicious. She suddenly looks puzzled, wondering how the other three found out about the king's curse, which is supposed to be an important top secret. Arta mockingly calls her an idiot, saying the answer should be obvious. Jane steps in to clear up the confusion, revealing the shocking truth that she, Johnny, and Arta are not just some random palace helpers. Coupled with the king's secretaries, knights, and even the chef, they are actually Carlos's closest family and know everything about the curse. Ursula feels deceived, realizing that the curse isn't really as top secret as she initially imagined. Her words make Jane reflect as she guesses that other people who they don't know might have also found out about the king's illness. Meanwhile, Carlos is busy in his study when his dark-haired secretary, Lannis, reports her presence. She has just returned from a recent investigation mission. Carlos remarks that her journey took a bit longer than he expected, but praises her for the good work. She admits that gathering information was quite difficult because the small village of Pierron is quite guarded against outsiders. She had tried searching for clues about Ursula, but most people waved them away, claiming not to know her, or gave them useless information. Their breakthrough finally came from an old man who only spilled the truth after she assured him she was just writing a book. Once the old man is comfortable, he happily shares his memories of when the Grand Witch first arrived in the village with a cute young Ursula. Back in the royal study, Lannis explains to the king that this arrival took place 13 years ago, in the spring of the year 486. When asked why he was so certain that the mysterious woman was actually the legendary Grand Witch, he revealed a story about a fateful meeting they shared long ago. The Grand Witch had approached him with a chilling prediction, warning that a massive summer flood was coming to sweep his young grandson away. She had told him not to leave the boy alone when the golden mountain bird sings. Although the furious shopkeeper initially screamed at her, calling her a fake fraud who needs to get lost, his anger turned to shock when a massive flood actually struck the village later that same summer, proving her words completely true. The terrifying rainstorm triggered a massive flood, burying the shopkeeper's house under the rising waters. The old man wanted to save his grandson, who was still asleep inside the cabin, but the villagers held him back, warning that the current was far too dangerous. Just when all hope seemed lost, a young Ursula arrived to save the day. The Grand Witch followed on her broomstick, reminding her young apprentice that changing one's fate isn't an easy task. Still, Ursula insisted on helping and with her magical staff, trapped the water in place until it disappeared. The old man's grandson was saved, and from then on, little Ursula and the Grand Witch became the man's savior and the village heroes. Lannis admits that she had tried to search for Ursula's background, but found no official record of her birth. Carlos is quite smart, as he knows the Grand Witch must have willingly allowed them to find Ursula. Lannis is doubtful, so the king explains that the Forest of Mazes can't be found without Arbonne's permission. He suspects that Ursula was sent to secretly ruin his plans, even though the girl herself has absolutely no idea. The so-called spy is currently writing a letter to her master, revealing that she has met the golden lion she talked about. She happily details her time at the palace, writing about how kind everyone is, including the stern-looking emperor. She is convinced that he is a good man, so she has vowed to do her best to save him. The next morning, Ursula's maids inform her about the night market happening at the Petal Festival. Our heroine isn't too impressed, until they mention the famous Monet Ronay's fried noodles. The maid's exciting description makes Ursula drool in hunger, and she earnestly vows to try it out. Unfortunately, her hopes are dashed during lunch, as Jane absolutely refuses to let her go. She is convinced that such an outing would be too dangerous for Ursula, even though the girl argues that she is just a commoner. Arta is amused by how quickly the mage changes her tune, because just yesterday, she was calling herself a genius magician. He also refuses to let her step outside, afraid she might be kidnapped and reveal the king's top secret. The boy is getting too smug, so Jane gives him a little factory reset. She apologizes to Ursula, but still refuses to take her to the market. The mage suddenly changes the topic, asking if they have tried the famous Ronay's noodles. Everyone, including Johnny, admits that they have gotten a taste. The farmer even mentions that she can only eat on site, which cancels out all plans of bringing over some noodles for her. Our heroine immediately deflates like a sad balloon, while Arta happily laughs in her face. Later that night, Ursula visits the king in his grand study where he is hard at work writing at his desk. She comments on how busy he is, and Carlos explains that he just needs to finish his current task. He retorts that she has also been quite busy lately, leaving them to only see each other during dinner time. Ursula agrees, pointing out that her lessons end around 6 in the evening, leaving them with only about 3 hours a day to spend together. She gently asks if the emperor is okay with this arrangement, since he likes it when they spend a long time together. Carlos playfully questions if she wants more time with him, and his teasing remark makes Ursula blush in denial. He is amused by her delicate behavior, but admits that their short time together is enough for him. His mind is already filled with thoughts about the little mage, so he doesn't want to depend on her too much. Therefore, he gives Ursula some free time, but the sneaky girl uses this chance to ask for an outing into the night market. She reveals her desire to eat the famous Monet's noodles and even complains about the people who tried to stop her. Unfortunately, Evele catches her tattling and also forbids her from stepping out. He insists that the trip is too risky, but Ursula can't understand how eating a bowl of noodles can cause any danger. The secretary says she would need at least 5 elite knights just to escort her, and Ursula finds this noble lifestyle incredibly annoying. The emperor puts an end to the bickering and firmly tells her to wait until next year, when her contract ends, explaining that they cannot waste imperial power on a simple festival trip. He dismisses Evele for the night, leaving a deeply disappointed Ursula behind as Evele says his goodbyes. The mage pouts and sighs in disappointment, realizing she has to wait a whole year just to eat some noodles. Seeing her sad reaction, the emperor changes his mind and puts on a dark cloak. He also wraps a heavy dark robe around Ursula, noting that he used to wear it when he was younger. Standing in his own matching cloak, he announces that he has some undercover business to take care of. He offers his hand, promising to give Ursula her noodles if she tags along and helps him. Looking surprised and hopeful, our heroine immediately reaches out to grab his hand. Ursula agrees to the adventurous plan by grabbing the emperor's hand, sealing their secret deal. Before she can prepare herself, Carlos suddenly lifts her up in a surprise bridal carry, causing a loud gasp of shock to escape her lips. She clutches his shoulders with startled eyes, asking if they are really leaving through the high bedroom window. Carlos remains calm, explaining that they will be caught if he goes through the hallways. Our heroine is still worried about how they will get down, but the king says they will escape by jumping as he steps right off the ledge. This time, our heroine can't even scream and just lets out a wordless, silent shout. Thankfully, the two land without breaking any bones. Carlos doesn't even give her a chance to breathe before he immediately leaps across the palace walls. Ursula clings to his dark cloak for dear life as they fly through the air like silent shadows. Finally, after several jumps, the emperor lands softly, while the terrified Ursula can barely open her eyes. Carlos praises her for doing well, as he gently sets her down on her feet. He whispers that they are finally safe and explains that walking just a bit further will lead them straight into the busy night market. He wants to know if Ursula is ready to eat some noodles, and the big baby happily shouts yes with the biggest joyful smile on her face. Together, they step into the lively, bustling streets which are filled with thousands of glowing lanterns. Ursula looks around in awe, captivated by the magical sights around them. She stops to admire a glowing glass globe and a moment later spots a cute, smiling flower toy, which she proudly shows to the emperor. The two stroll along in their dark cloaks, but their shady attires catch the interest of some popular Lizeppo reporters. Stefan and Peter are sure the two must have a high status and sneakily decide to follow their trail. They tail the couple from a distance, trying to guess their identities. Stefan, thinking that some young noble ladies sneak out of their homes to meet up with their personal guards, is convinced that the two must be secret lovers on a romantic date. They hope to photograph a major scandal this time around. Meanwhile, the oblivious couple weave through the crowd to get some noodles. The two have never been around so many people, and in their excitement, they almost get separated. Thankfully, Carlos reappears, grabbing her hand to keep her close, and warning her not to get lost. Ursula turns red as she thanks the king for saving her. The two continue on their way, but this time, they are holding hands tightly. Ursula's heart almost beats right out of her chest, and she is very grateful when she spots the noodle shop ahead. Even though she tries to distract herself by talking, she still can't stop her racing heart. Our heroine can't even hear the words around her, and even her most attractive noodles have lost all their appeal. The girl, in her nervousness, almost reveals the king's identity, but he quickly stops her, asking her to call him by his nickname. His simple words make Ursula's heart race again, making her hide her face and begging him to let go of her hand. The two finally head in to get the famous noodles, and, as always, Ursula is in food heaven. Unfortunately, all poor Carlos can taste is the feeling of worms. Ursula, feeling distressed, leans closer to her boss, but her sudden action gives the reporters a chance to take a clear picture of their faces. The two reporters stand quietly on top the roof of a building, quietly taking pictures of the mystery couple. The gray-haired man soon recognizes the king's identity, but before he can react, a large, strong hand reaches out from the darkness and grabs him. The two men scream in fright as they are overpowered and pinned down by a group of elite royal guards. An imposing woman with red hair steps forward, burning the camera in flames and making the photographer cry for his beloved film. She watches with an annoyed expression, asking how they dared take pictures of the emperor without his official permission. The reporters finally recognize the famous and powerful knight known as the Red Fox Tanya. They desperately cry for mercy until a stern-faced Tanya replies that she has no plans to kill them. She calmly returns the empty camera to the photographer's shaking hands. The man whispers a quick thank you, but Tanya isn't done with them. She shows off her highlight flames, giving the men one final, terrifying warning. They are allowed to leave safely tonight, but they must never say a single word about seeing the king to anyone else. The two men nod quickly, and the royal guards soon disappear. The red-haired reporter is still confused, but the other laments about the big scoop they just missed. Meanwhile, on a high rooftop overlooking the town, the royal guards realize that the emperor has slipped away from them once again. Still, they feel relieved because their elite vice captain is on duty to handle the situation. This leader is Tanya, famously known as the Red Fox. She started her career as a mercenary but soon became the Empire's top knight through sheer skill. Along with her ability to use fire magic, she also possesses a special skill called Trace. The guards continue their search but can't resist gossiping about Carlos's strange behavior. One of the knights even points out that his nighttime adventure with Ursula seems more like a date. The three share an awkward glance before Tanya screams that they are just weapons and are absolutely not allowed to have such thoughts. Finally, her Trace skill soon creates a golden line, showing that the Emperor is currently at the Swagon's mansion. Instead of using the front door like a normal guest, Tanya, yelling for her master, recklessly crashes through the window. The men don't seem surprised to see her while she gives a hasty greeting to Count Perus. The next moment, she loudly scolds the Emperor, complaining about how hard it is for the guards when he constantly runs away. Carlos shows no remorse, even smiling and saying she came much earlier than he expected. Perus, Arda's elder brother, also joins forces with Tanya to caution the king. Our male lead, tired of their scolding, stops them with a simple word. He reveals his true purpose for visiting, to rid Lizepo of all its corruption. He explains that the imperial palace is full of corrupt officials who behave like spiders. They form corrupt alliances and even steal from the state coffers. Because it is incredibly difficult to determine exactly who is embezzling the money and how much is missing, the Emperor makes a direct request. He asks the Swagon family to help him track down these corrupt spiders. The group are shocked by the king's request, with Perus pointing out that they are just a weakened household. This is exactly what the king needs because no one will guard against a weak family head selling ham to survive. Carlos knows that Perus has always been smarter than he looks, which is why he is willing to give him this mission. The formerly gentle man suddenly sighs, revealing a sharp look. He agrees to track down those spiders and is prepared for another bloodbath. The group head over to see Ursula, who is busy admiring her treasures. She is excited to see the knights while Arda is bothered by her huge amount of luggage. Ursula reveals that the gifts were bought by the king during their little trip. She shows off her treasures while Carlos, like a proud CEO, asks if she likes them all. Ursula blushes as she replies that she does. The couple's action convinces everyone that the two are on a date, and the bold Perus even has the courage to ask if they are a couple. Ursula's face turns red, but before she can deny it, the king firmly says, that is impossible. She becomes pale as he refers to her as just an important partner. Chapter 14. The room is filled with silence as everyone shares awkward glances. When the air becomes too uncomfortable, Ursula steps in with a cheerful laugh, agreeing that she is just a magician. She doesn't notice the unreadable look the Emperor is currently throwing her way. Carlos lets out a soft sigh, telling everyone to head back immediately. Later that night, Ursula is alone in her bedroom and unable to sleep. She lies on her bed, staring blankly at the ceiling while thinking about the king's dismissive words. She tries to convince herself that she also feels nothing for him, but the memory of his warm palm can't escape her mind. The mage tries to go to sleep, but she keeps seeing Carlos's handsome face. She groans in frustration because she can still recall his sweet sunny scent from the moment he held her in an embrace. Our heroine buries her overly red face in her pillow, feeling like she is going insane. The next morning, the evidence of her sleepless night shows on her face in the form of 2 huge dark circles. Johnny doesn't think she should harvest today, but Ursula insists on working. The wheat has all ripened because of the potion, so this is the perfect time to harvest them all. Ursula also has another reason for working so hard. During their little trip, she discovered that the eggs taste more horrible for Carlos if more ingredients are added. He even revealed that he can't eat eggs prepared by others because he is already addicted to hers. Every evening, he waits patiently like a dog for her to bring him some eggs. Ursula imagines Carlos waving around a fluffy tail and immediately laughs at the cute image. The next second, she regains her senses, horrified to find herself calling the man cute. To distract herself from these feelings, she channels all her embarrassment into her work, pulling out the wheat with a crazy speed. The whole field is soon harvested, but Ursula knows this is only the beginning. She immediately gets right back to work, pulling the wheat stalks to separate the grains and grinding it through a stone mill. Finally, she gets a little bowl of flour, which makes her very happy. To gather the final ingredient, she heads deeper into the forest to collect some wild honey. Johnny warns her that the massive bee-covered hive might be dangerous, but the confident Ursula reassures him that she knows the forest well and has nothing to fear. When she reaches the tree, the angry bees buzz fiercely, but she politely asks them to share just a little bit of honey. Surprisingly, the bees cooperate and actually shift aside. Ursula carefully cuts a piece of honeycomb with her knife, thanking the friendly insects. She is about to leave when disaster suddenly strikes. Our heroine slips on a little rock, tumbling backwards through the air as Johnny screams her name in absolute panic. Instead of hitting the dirt, Ursula drifts into a magical, dreamlike state. She wakes up lying in a beautiful field of green grass and blooming flowers. A mysterious voice echoes around her, asking how long she plans to sleep and telling her to wake up. Suddenly, a beautiful silver-haired woman in a white gown appears before her, whispering that today is the day. Ursula is curious about this mysterious silver-haired woman who resembles her a lot. The woman gently touches Ursula's cheek, noting she is in a distant time. She apologizes for leaving Ursula alone and tells her to wake up. Our heroine opens her eyes in the real world, where her worried friend asks if she is okay. She instantly becomes emotional as she cries and covers her face, insisting that she has lost something important. Ursula breaks down in tears, affected by her weird little trance. Johnny, unaware of the details, thinks she is crying because of her missing honey. He points to a little cube a few feet away, causing Ursula to stare at him with wide eyes. Even if she calls it moronic, she still bottles up her jar of honey. The two return to the castle where Ursula prepares some amazing pancakes for the king. Except, Carlos keeps staring at it with wide eyes, looking like he is confronting his enemy. Ursula assumes that he doubts the taste, assuring him that even the head chef praised her cooking skill this time. That must be the reassurance Carlos was looking for, because he soon begins to eat. The king takes one bite and in the next second, turns into a giant devourer. He doesn't even reply to Ursula, and only when he notices the girl's amused glances does he realize that he has crumbs all over his face. Carlos blushes, wiping his face and admitting that the food tasted so good, he forgot his royal manners. Ursula admires his cute behavior as he completely devours the pancakes until a sparkling white plate is left behind. After the meal, the two retire to a sofa inside a quiet parlor. Carlos is deeply touched by her efforts and sincerely thanks Ursula because he never thought he would have a proper meal ever again. Ursula giggles softly, claiming it wasn't a big deal. The king has a different opinion because he heard that she had fainted after falling from a tree while gathering the honey. He gently touches her green hair and asks if her head is hurt. His gentle action makes Ursula blush as she says she is fine. Carlos makes her promise to avoid danger, warning her that risking her life for honey is very foolish. Ursula playfully defends herself but turns serious as she recounts that she had a strange dream. She tells Carlos about the beautiful white-haired woman who has been appearing in her dreams. Whenever she thinks of this mysterious lady, she feels incredibly sad and misses her deeply, though she cannot remember who she is no matter how hard she tries. Ursula then shares a sad truth. She has no memories of her own childhood. She doesn't know her identity, her family, or her real age. Her very earliest memory is of herself as a lost little girl crying in the middle of the woods. She was all alone until her teacher, the Grand Witch, found her and named her Ursula. Because Ursula remembers nothing from her childhood before this encounter, the Emperor wonders if the mysterious woman in Ursula's dream is actually a long-lost family member. Secretly, the Emperor grows highly suspicious, thinking the Grand Witch might have abducted Ursula to turn her into an obedient puppet for her personal gain. When he asks what the witch is like, Ursula defends her passionately, calling her master an amazing person. Carlos wants to know how Arbonne treated Ursula, and the mage expresses that she was a wonderful mother figure. The Emperor suggests that the witch might have erased Ursula's memories, but Ursula rejects this idea completely. Sensing her distress, Carlos apologizes, admitting that the royal family and the Grand Witch are at odds, which makes him very suspicious. He gently urges Ursula to rest, but his revelation sparks her curiosity. She demands to know more about the conflict between her beloved teacher and the royals, refusing to let the matter drop. She even pushes Carlos's petting hand away, insisting on knowing the full story. With no choice, the king reveals that Arbonne was the one who cursed the royal family. Of course, Ursula protests, certain that the grimy witch she saw in her vision couldn't be her elegant and beautiful master. Carlos suggests that she might have disguised herself. He is certain about his claims because the royal archives recorded that the Grand Witch had cursed the first emperor. They hid this truth from the world to preserve the empire's dignity. Ursula is still doubtful, wondering why he ordered a search for the Grand Witch. Carlos says he wanted to hear her side of the story and wasn't afraid since things couldn't get any worse. The mage insists that her master isn't planning to harm the royals because she was the one who advised Ursula to help King Carlos. The man is tired of their arguments and, with a sigh, apologizes for insulting her teacher. He reveals his worry that she is being used by others to control the curse. Ursula suddenly looks betrayed, accusing Carlos of never trusting her in the first place. With a teary gaze, she says the man has been using her and even runs away in agony. It is too late for Carlos to stop the fleeing girl and he sighs in defeat, declaring this mess the worst. The next day, our mage is still lying in bed while shedding giant tears. The experienced maids manage to coax her into raising her head and having a sip of water. They stare at her sad face, wondering who made their little girl upset. Right now, she seems like she has just gotten her heart broken. Well, she has. The maids try to find out why Ursula is so upset, and when they suggest that she fought with the king, she blows very hard into the napkin. The servants are surprised to hear this because the emperor has sent someone from the royal palace to treat her wounds from the fall. The lady has been waiting outside because Ursula was crying so hard. The lady introduces herself as Miss Verna, the palace physician who has come to treat Ursula's wounds from her fall earlier. Tears disappear gradually from Ursula's face as she asks how long the physician has waited. The maid whispers that it has been 40 minutes, causing our heroine to feel some guilt. The physician examines Ursula and concludes that there aren't any abnormalities. She only gives a potion to Ursula and instructs her to sleep well after taking it. Ursula thanks her, and just as she's about to leave, Verna hands her a brown envelope with a red seal. They recognize it as His Majesty's seal, after which Miss Verna takes her leave. One of the maids is curious about what His Majesty has said, but the other one points out that it should be read in private since it contains the seal. They bid one another goodnight while Ursula stares at the envelope in amazement. She opens it and finds a beautiful gold necklace with a pendant that looks like the ocean. She also finds a note from Carlos apologizing for hurting her and explaining the reason for doubting her teacher. He says that he is only human and cannot help but harbor a resentment for the Grand Witch for being the reason for his cursed life. He asks her to accept the necklace as a token of atonement and a sign of trust. Ursula notices a postscript where the king informs her that he would be participating in the hunting festival, which starts tomorrow, and tells her that she can rest in the palace. Ursula, always curious, wonders what this means. The following morning, Miss Jane explains to her that it's a hunt for the nobles, where whoever catches the biggest animal within 3 days has the honor of throwing the sun banquet. Ursula realizes that she won't be seeing Carlos for 3 days and she regrets shouting at him yesterday. She feels eager to reconcile with him and offers to take part in the hunt as well. She asks Miss Jane where Carlos is, but the maid says he must have departed early in the morning and should be there already. Ursula isn't happy about it and wants to be with the Emperor, insisting that she cannot leave him alone. She acts cute, using her pretty face to persuade Miss Jane to take her along. The lady is touched by Ursula's sincere care for the king and agrees to take her since she doesn't have any standing order to protect the palace. Later, Miss Jane, Ursula, and her maids are dressed up, waiting by the carriage. They are dressed in beautiful party dresses, and Ursula wonders if they aren't overdressed for a hunting festival. The maids assure her that the festival is an elaborate event which might even host a tea party and isn't as crude as Ursula imagines. Meanwhile, the venue of the hunting festival, the grounds of a large and very beautiful castle, has been well decorated. The lawn is green and neat, and there is a water fountain. Everyone present is elaborately dressed, and amongst the crowd, a maid excitedly and secretly points out Marquis Sam Zeben, a handsome young man, to her lady. She gushes about his good looks and claims he is a perfect husband material. The lady opposes this and says that the emperor, Carlos Aforni, is the most desirable bachelor. She gushes that all the emperors have always been loving to their wives, and even the current palace they live in was built for the former empress. The maid laughs and wonders if being a loving husband is also hereditary. Just then, someone announces that the festival will begin immediately. The announcer states the rules to the hearing of everyone present. She states that one must make the catch themselves, and that the person with the biggest catch by sunset on the 3rd day would be the victor. Just then, someone blows a horn to signify the start of the hunt, and everyone rushes off. Tanya is with the emperor, and she observes that Carlos does not look enthusiastic about the hunt. His Majesty claims that the hunt has no merit for him as the prize money is given by the palace, and there is no political advantage in throwing the sun banquet. Tanya asks if His Majesty is not enjoying the hunt, and he says he's just not feeling it. The night continues to press, asking the emperor if he is moody or tired. Carlos finds her a burden and feeling frustrated, he asks her to go ahead and hunt without him. She refuses at first, but he convinces her that he is tired and needs some rest. Tanya rides away on her horse after Carlos admonishes her to try to win. When he is alone, his mind flashes back to the physician's report about Ursula, and he facepalms. The physician reported that she had to wait for almost an hour because Ursula was crying so much. He is upset and bothered about this. Just then, he hears someone calling his attention, and when looks up, it is Ursula running towards him. She asks him why he left her, but Carlos wants to know how she got here. Ursula explains that she begged Jane to bring her along. She is worried that she isn't allowed to be here, but Carlos dismisses that worry immediately. He even says he is glad to have her presence. Ursula brings up their argument last night, and Carlos interrupts, asking if she has forgiven him a little. Ursula is stunned at first before she laughs happily. She says she doesn't dare to forgive the king, and instead, she should be the one feeling sorry. Carlos invites her to share a horse with him, and Ursula agrees. The words are barely out of her lips, but the king is already grabbing her waist and lifting her to sit right in front of him. Ursula is speechless and once again blushes like a ripe berry when facing the king's overwhelming actions. She lies that she is feeling comfortable when he asks, but our heroine is actually uneasy. The people in the hunting grounds are shocked to see the emperor with a woman. They wonder who she is while he rides away with her into the forest. As they ride further into the forest, Ursula wants to know if Carlos truly thinks that he was cursed by her teacher. Carlos replies with a question of his own. He asks her why she thinks the Grand Witch is called the Grand Witch. Ursula easily says that is how it's always been in legends for a very long time. Carlos goes on to retell the story of the founding myth of the empire. He says that the royals have always said the child of the forest, called the Grand Witch, protected the world alongside the Sun King. Ursula asks if he is suggesting that the tale is a lie. Carlos says it's true, but that at first, she was called the child of the forest until the royals made her into a witch. He says he doesn't know the reason why, but it is true that the child of the forest cursed the royals. Ursula reasons that there aren't that many people who could actually do such a strong curse. She maintains that she trusts her teacher but would love to meet her and talk to her in hopes that she would be able to solve the problem. Just then, they hear a rustle in some bushes close by and a majestic-looking deer pops out. Carlos immediately aims at the deer with his bow and arrow, but Ursula quickly stops him from shooting, allowing the deer to run off. Ursula demands to know why he would want to shoot it after seeing its doe eyes. She tries to convince Carlos not to kill anything, but he points out that it is a hunting festival. She still maintains that he shouldn't kill, as nothing good comes out from getting blood on one's hands for fun. She says it might call forth something evil, and Carlos asks if it's something evil like a curse. Ursula isn't sure, but she says a smidgen of blood on the sun might not be a problem as an attempt to look on the bright side. She further urges the Emperor not to get blood on his hands if he can help it, since he is already cursed. Marquis Zeben wonders if he is in dreamland. He asks if he is in heaven, but Ursula replies that he is awake, wondering if he has a concussion. He exclaims that the fairy of the forest saved him, and proceeds to ask the fairy her name. Ursula is lost for words, wondering what to do. Just then, the jealous Emperor arrives and separates his woman from this clingy fellow. Ursula happily tells the Emperor that the Marquis probably needs to see a doctor. Marquis Zeben is angry at whoever is stopping him from seeing his fairy of the forest, and is about to confront the person when he sees Carlos standing before him. He stutters and bows immediately in greeting to the Emperor, apologizing for not recognizing him on time. Carlos calls for the Emperor's sword, and the soldiers drop down from the trees, surprising Ursula. He instructs them to escort the badly injured Marquis Zeben back, but the man protests, turning around several times to sneak a look at his awesome fairy. Carlos quickly takes Ursula away while the guards escort a woozy Marquis Zeben. Still, he is obsessed and desperate to know the identity of the beautiful fairy with green hair. Carlos and Ursula get back on the horse, riding one more through the forest. Ursula mentions that she has never seen a bear before, as there are none in the Forest of Mazes. She had imagined them to be fluffy, round, and cute, like the one her teacher gave to her. The bear she'd seen in real life, though, was scary, big, and growled so loudly. Carlos is amazed that even at that, she still asked him to let her down to save Marquis Zeben. She says she didn't want him to die, but Carlos points out that without magic, there was nothing she could have done. Ursula continues to insist that she would have been strong if not for the zodiac magic. She asks Carlos why he did nothing when he could have saved Marquis Zeben, and he replies that the Marquis was arrogant. Since he had gone after a prey that was out of his league, he should just have accepted his fate. Ursula recalls their time during the night market when he smiled happily when watching a beautiful family. Yet at times like this, he seems very cold. Meanwhile, in a beautiful room befitting a noble family, some ladies gossip about Ursula and Carlos to Lady Shuel. Janet Curran, the daughter of a count, reports that the magician was seen riding with the Emperor at the hunting festival, causing a lot of whispering in the room. The ladies wonder how she could dare to disregard the most royal etiquette, which is to always keep an adequate distance from the royals. Someone had even gotten her hand chopped off during the time of the former emperor for disregarding this rule. The ladies wonder if the magician could be the emperor's lover. Janet dismisses that idea, reminding them that the magician is of lowly birth. She then points out that Lady Shuel has the status and meets all the criteria to be the next empress. Shuel tries to stop the line of discussion from continuing, but the girls are on a roll. Larissa Hyrune, the daughter of a count, points out that status doesn't really matter if His Majesty is interested in the person. She doesn't think a commoner would want to cross that line, though, and they all laugh. Shuel smiles along with them, but secretly wonders how vulgar they can be. It's sunset, and Carlos and Ursula are still riding on a horse in the forest amidst the cool evening wind, blowing leaves around. Ursula marvels at the sunset as this is the first time she is seeing it in a foreign land, having only lived near the Forest of Mazes. She says it was fascinating when she first came to the capital, although the palace feels quite stuffy for a country girl like her. The gentle wind continues to blow leaves around, and Ursula comments on how refreshing it feels. Carlos watches in amazement, suddenly mentioning that his vacation home will become useful now, and suggests that they come here more often. Ursula asks where he's referring to, and he says the majestic palace where the competition began. He talks about how it was a waste and was only built to satisfy the extravagance of the former empress. He even calls the hunting festival an extravagance, and thinks he will scrap it altogether because he's annoyed. Ursula is intrigued that he is always referring to the former empress, and asks if that doesn't refer to his mother. Carlos is horrified by the idea, and quickly clarifies that his real mother died while giving birth to him. He is amazed at her ignorance, and Ursula explains that she has only ever studied magic in the forest. Just then, they arrive back at the castle, and he reassures her that it isn't important. Ursula thinks it seems to be quite important, though. Helping her off the horse, he remarks that they are both orphan buddies. Ursula says that she has her teacher, of course, and Carlos comments that he also has Ariana, leaving Ursula wondering who that is. The couple are oblivious to the fact that they are being watched. Lady Janet and Lady Larissa both watch closely, surprised that the rumors are true and wondering who the magician really is. Larissa continues to watch Carlos and Ursula, and concludes that His Majesty is very generous to be so kind to a weed on the road. She maintains that there's only one thing you do to a weed: you crush it because they are annoying. The Countess Jordan is standing in front of her, and she asks her if she would like to see if the magician is a weed or not. The Countess Jordan flinches, a bit intimidated by Larissa, and says that she is indeed also curious. In the meantime, Ursula has retired to her quarters and is extremely exhausted from horse riding all day. Jane asks to reconfirm that Ursula is glad to be here, and she affirms that she is glad and feels so much better despite the tiredness. Just then, they hear a knock on the door and they wonder who is calling so late. Jane thinks it might be a threat and decides not to put her guard down. It turns out to be the Viscountess, Sophie Jordan. She apologizes for coming so late and says she has a message for Ursula. She greets the mage with a courtesy, introducing herself properly. Jane is still wary of her and wonders why she is bowing so low, thinking she must be up to something. Ursula greets the Viscountess cheerfully, and she proceeds to hand Ursula an envelope containing an invitation to a tea party. Jordan informs her that a party will happen tomorrow, and then begs her to show up before she leaves abruptly. Jane tells Ursula it would be better not to go, but the next day, the mage gets her maid to braid her hair into 2 pigtails, dress her up very pretty dress and matching high-heeled shoes. They put a lot of effort into making her look stunning, and then she's on her way. She knocks on the door of the venue, and noble ladies let her in and welcome her. There's already a platter of tea things and trays of cake set on the table. Lady Chuel greets her warmly and thanks her for coming, then proceeds to introduce all the ladies in the room. There are 5 ladies in all: Janet, Larissa, Maria, and Sophie. Ursula recognizes Maria as the wife of one of the royal guards and the daughter of a count. As they begin the tea party, the Viscountess asks Ursula what she does in the palace. She can't reveal that the king is under a curse, so she tells them that she is experimenting with magic and applying it to farm work. Chuel praises her and talks about the prices of food being too high of late. Janet adds that the harvests had been bad in the last few years, and this surprises Ursula as there has been good weather. Larissa drops her teacup with a clank just then and asks Ursula why she attended the hunting festival instead of doing her farming. Ursula quickly replies that she needed to report something urgently. Larissa pretends to be ignorant, saying Ursula must really have come to report something urgent. After all, there is no way she came here just to get close to the king, riding a horse together and making everyone think they are a couple. Janet goes on to say that the spring lovers thing must be a sham, and asks if Ursula thinks she's something by being invited to the nobles' party. She proceeds to berate Ursula for daring to go close to the king, but Chuel yells for her to stop and scolds her for being rude. Janet asks why she should be polite to a commoner, but Chuel reminds her that Ursula is a noble guest. Larissa agrees with Janet that it is weird to be polite to a commoner either way, and asks Ursula what she thinks. Ursula is busy munching away at the cake, and simply tells the ladies that she doesn't mind how they behave towards her. She, however, comments that she has become very close to His Majesty enough for him to give her a gift. As she speaks, she reveals the gold necklace with the ocean-like pendant from around her neck where she kept it hidden beneath her dress. Then she proceeds to show it off to the stunned ladies. Ursula concludes that if the ladies are going to be childish, then so would she. She asks the ladies if they think the necklace is pretty, and they all stare at her, still stunned. And then they all start laughing, except Chuel and Maria. Ursula is puzzled at their reaction, but then Larissa remarks that His Majesty gave her lalima, a stone that is not really considered a jewel. Janet laughingly adds that since it isn't diamond, ruby, sapphire, or emerald, then he must have given her a valueless gift. Ursula stands and declares the ladies are very old-fashioned, causing them to freeze in shock and listen. She tells them that they are materialistic, and don't understand that the true value is not the cost of the object, but that it was given as a token of trust and is beautiful like the ocean. She remembers how people insulted her for her commoner appearance and how she felt embarrassed by it. But now she actually finds it funny. The mage is the one laughing now as she tells them how she studied everything they know and found it easy compared to making and mixing the ingredients for a cake. She tells the ladies that they should be grateful to be a part of the empire while Maria claps. Janet can't believe Ursula is talking about how amazing common cake is. The mage announces that she would be leaving after eating the cake, saying it would be a pity since it is their first time meeting. Maria cheerfully waves her off, remarking that they would surely see each other again. On her way back, as Ursula wonders why the ladies waste such energy on useless topics when they should be enjoying the tea party, she is halted by a figure running towards her and calling her attention. Chuel meets up with her and asks her to wait a second. She wants to know if Ursula is truly the king's lover. The mage almost faints from shock and hurriedly denies this accusation. Chuel wants to know what their true relationship is, and Ursula stutters that they are business partners or more like friends. Chuel asks Ursula if she has no feelings for His Majesty, and Ursula stops to think of the times she had felt attracted to him. She honestly and simply answers that she doesn't know. Chuel suddenly grabs the mage's shoulders, asking her to listen carefully. She says with a teary look that Carlos would never let Ursula be by his side. She confesses that she has been watching the king for a while, and the ocean-like necklace, which she reveals belonged to Carlos's nanny Ariana Lapong, is a symbol of determination. Ursula can't understand the lady's mysterious words and why a necklace would be scary. Chuel tells Ursula that if she truly loves the king, she should try confessing her love and realize why it is scary. Our heroine is still confused about this as she makes her way home. It all doesn't make sense to her, and she doesn't even know if she loves the emperor. She blushes even as these thoughts cross her mind, and she waves her hand about in protest. Just then, an unfamiliar maid walks up to her and tells her that Marquis Zeben has ordered her to escort Ursula to the square. Ursula wonders why, but the maid pleads with her to come along, claiming that the Marquis has insisted on her presence. Ursula agrees to go with her, wondering if all nobles like to order people around this way. She gets to the square, and Marquis Zaiban welcomes her with dewy eyes, blushing as he calls her his fairy. Marquis Zaiban says he has been waiting for his fairy and remarks that she looks beautiful today. While Ursula wonders if he is sick in the head, he quickly grabs her hand. The mage pulls away instantly, wanting to know why he requested her presence. Zaiban grabs her hand again, but this time bows and apologizes for his manners. He introduces himself to her as Sam Zaiban, the Eastern Arrow, and after placing a kiss on her hand, asks her to call him Sam. Ursula shudders, sneakily pulling away as she introduces herself with a polite courtesy. The man insists on calling her his fairy, making Ursula secretly convinced that he must be crazy. She has heard of the famous Eastern Arrow, one of the 4 major marquis of the Lizepo Empire. They are one of the most powerful military houses. Ursula has even heard some rumors about this second son, Sam. He became the head of the household after the previous head, Haben Ziben, passed away 2 years ago. Yet he couldn't even shoot a single arrow during his attack. Ursula asks again what business he has with her, and Sam goes on to tell her about how he was up all night thinking of a way to repay her for saving him. He is blushing severely, making Ursula wonder if the man might have caught a cold or something. She quickly assures him that it was Carlos and not her who saved him. Sam immediately dismisses the idea, insisting that the cold-faced king wouldn't have saved him. He is certain that Ursula is his savior, so he grabs her arm, pulling her out to see the surprise he has prepared for her. The so-called surprise ends up being the head of a bear sitting on top of a gift box and surrounded by loads of white flowers. Zaiban doesn't notice the girl's frightened gaze and keeps boasting that the bear had connected their hearts. He proudly reveals how he slaughtered it after many sleepless nights, expressing that the gift represents his love for her. He laughs like a maniac, saying, "This is the first time getting anyone a gift." He gives Ursula a crazy look as he confesses his love, trying to force her into accepting his proposal. The mage is left speechless as she shudders and breaks into a sweat. The next moment, her gaze goes dim as she suddenly drops into a faint. Someone catches her before she hits the ground while Sam screams and watches. The guard who rescues her places her gently on the ground and orders Sam to stay away. The crazy Sam instantly pulls out his sword, questioning how a lowly guard can challenge his authority. The guard reveals that he is the Empire's sword, Gina Rippenhar, sent to protect Ursula under the command of the Emperor. He threatens to attack anyone who comes closer, accusing them of challenging the king's authority. Sam's guards try to stand up for him, but he raises a hand to stop them from talking. He has a crazy look on his face as he tells Gina that he means no harm since he actually loves Ursula. He even claims that she fainted only because she was so moved by the gift. The Marquis tries to step closer, but Gina swipes his sword left and right, proving that his threat wasn't empty. Sam stops abruptly while Gina threatens to cut off his neck if he comes any closer. The Marquis' guards are about to attack, but he stops them, knowing he can't kill the Emperor's dog in front of so many people. He promises never to forget the way Gina humiliated him today, and with a wave of his sleeves, leaves with his troop of guards. Meanwhile, we delve into a strange scene. Under a blood-red sky, we see a woman with blonde hair walking towards a man standing at the edge of a cliff. She calls the man Alec, and in turn, he scolds her for coming to such a dangerous place with her fragile body. The two get closer as they fondle each other, with the woman promising that their work will go faster if they work together. We finally see her face, and it turns out to be the mystery woman in Ursula's dream. She seems upset because there has been so much bloodshed and too many lives have been lost. Alec calls them sacrifices for the greater good, insisting that the woman must know this already. After all, she can also see into the future. Unknown to the two, a silent spectator is watching their meeting, and it turns out to be Ursula. She seems to be standing in the midst of 2 rows of soldiers holding up spears. She listens to the loud noises when she suddenly hears a voice begging for her help. Ursula looks down, spotting a small child with fox-like ears. The next moment, it turns feral, calling her a murderer and baring its sharp teeth. It is unknown what happens, but blood soon splashes on Ursula's face. The girl screams in fear until she wakes up shivering in bed while the concerned emperor tries to calm her down. Carlos, noticing her pale face, assures her that it was just a bad dream. Refusing to relax like he instructed, Ursula sits up in pain. The king had been worried since she wouldn't wake up, but now he feels slightly relieved. Ursula is about to reply, but her head suddenly begins to ache. She seems to be looking at Carlos, but she can see flashes of the mysterious Alec right beside the king. The two share a very striking resemblance, with the only difference being their eyes. Ursula can even smell blood, causing her to cover her nose in disgust. She wails in despair as she asks what she is going to do because she seems to be under the witch's control. Carlos is confused by her statement, so she explains that she can feel the witch's emotions. She shivers as she realizes that she can only break the witch's curse if she finds out the story behind it. She has to understand why the witch cast the curse and the emotions she was feeling when she cursed the child of the sun. She reveals to Carlos that the witch only sees him as the child of the sun. Because of her connection to the witch, she also feels some hatred towards Carlos and even has the desire to lay a curse on him. Ursula covers her face in despair because she doesn't want to have these feelings towards Carlos. The worried emperor offers to get the doctor, but she suddenly stops him by touching his cheek. The girl seems feverish as she reveals that she doesn't hate him. Instead, she admires the way he shines, just like the Sun King, Alexander. He is the closest to the first emperor, but she feels relieved because they aren't the same at all. Ursula leans into his embrace, calling his nickname and declaring that she will never hate him. Carlos is still in shock, but the person in his arms has already fallen asleep and even begins to snore. He facepalms but hugs her tightly while letting out a sigh of despair. Later, Ursula wakes up to a familiar ceiling. Shocked by the sight, she sits up, wondering if everything was just a dream. Just then, Jane arrives with a maid, and the two are both excited to see their mistress awake. Ursula is still confused, so Jane explains that they returned to the palace because they were worried about her health. They disclose that Ursula had slept for a full day, stunning even the culprit herself. She is still concerned about the hunting festival, and Jane recounts that the weird Marquis had managed to win. She feels bad, thinking her mistress must have been shocked by his antics and regrets not being by her side. Ursula announces that she doesn't want to meet Sam ever again, and Jane also suggests that she takes a break for some time. She tells Ursula everything that happened after she fainted. She had rushed to Ursula's side after hearing the news, but when Gina tried to take the mage away, an arrow meant for Ursula flew in their direction. Jane had quickly sensed it, and with her quick reflexes, sliced the arrow in half. They discovered an assassin, hiding in some trees a short distance away, but even though they wanted to go after him, they had to think of Ursula's safety first. Our heroine is shocked that someone tried to kill her or wound her. She wonders who could be responsible, but since they didn't catch the assassin, Jane also has no idea. She doesn't think it is the crazy Marquis and instead wants to know if Ursula has anyone she finds suspicious, someone who acts defensive or hates her, or even someone who loves the king and is jealous of her. Well, our heroine sadly has all three of them as she thinks of three certain ladies. Poor Jane is frightened for her mistress, but realizes that Ursula's closeness with the king has brought her too much attention. She relates the king's new decision. Ursula has to stay away from him until things die down eventually. The days pass by as our heroine sinks into a melancholic mood. Even during her lunch with Johnny and Jane, she keeps staring at her healthy field of fresh vegetables. The two are surprised that the foodie isn't eating, which reminds Ursula to open her sandwich. But she doesn't even take a bite before dropping it back and asking about the emperor's eating schedule. Jane reassures her that Carlos said he didn't mind eating as he used to and wants her to rest. But instead of feeling relieved, Ursula shoots up from her seat in protest. Why should he eat like that when she could just prepare his food and send it to him, or send what she harvested to the chef? She knows that this will make his meals a lot better. The mage can't hide her worry about his majesty because she thinks he is suffering without her by his side. Jane calmly points out that the king has survived 17 years without Ursula and has been fighting this curse. A simple 9 months isn't enough to kill him. Our heroine freezes in shock when she hears the words 9 months, as she realizes that Carlos doesn't plan to see her ever again. The naive girl wonders if she did something wrong, making Jane realize that she made a big mistake. She quickly assures the girl that they just don't want her to worry. She promises that Carlos is strong and is only doing this because he is afraid Ursula will get hurt. The mage settles down, but while she knows he is a strong person, she can tell that he is also lonely too. Meanwhile, the king's knights are also surprised by his sudden decision to stay away from Ursula. Evely points out that with Gina protecting the mage, the girl should be safe from any problems, especially since they are in the palace. He is also worried about the king's meal, but Carlos cuts off their discussion. The secretaries, sensing his anger, immediately apologize, reporting that the banquet preparations are proceeding properly. The king sends his men away and resumes his work. His worries are extremely justified because barely a few days ago, his knights reported that an assassin was following Ursula. Thankfully, they had managed to block the arrow with Tanya already following their trails. Still, the news had upset Carlos, leaving him yelling in the large hall full of nobles. His knight tried to calm him down, assuring him that Ursula was perfectly fine. Yet, the king wasn't relieved and after announcing that he had an emergency, heads out to secretly visit Ursula. Recalling that incident leaves Carlos in a mess, and he even ruins the document he is working on. He covers his face in despair, feeling sick and tired of the situation. Once again, he almost lost someone he dearly loved, all because of his greed. This incident brings back painful memories buried deep within his heart. His thoughts drift back to the past, and the story transitions into a flashback of his childhood. Carlos might not have had a mother, but he had a nanny who doted on him extremely well. Ariana would make scented pouches for him, gifting him cute little presents to lift his spirits. One day, she had begged him not to become the crown prince because he would become cursed and used as a shield for the second prince. The 10-year-old Carlos therefore refused when he was asked to become the crown prince. The 16th empress, Peony, had only laughed teasingly, convinced that some must have brainwashed the little prince. Dale, the 16th emperor, was just a wife slave with no senses, and soon, he had his men drag in a beaten and battered Ariana. Of course, the young Carlos had caved, agreeing to become the crown prince and begging for mercy for his nanny. The evil Peony had agreed to show mercy at first, but immediately the boy agreed. She immediately claimed the maid had to be punished for not knowing her place. Clearly, she only saw the two as a joke. Soon, poor Ariana was beheaded right in front of the young Carlos. Peony watched him cradle the body in delight, saying her act of mercy is to let the nanny's daughter live. With no choice, Carlos is dressed up and a coronation ceremony is held to make him the crown prince. Immediately the crown is placed upon his head, the evil witch appears, pleased to see her new little victim. She curses him to live under the stench of rotting blood and flesh for a lifetime, a punishment for all the descendants of the greedy first emperor. Carlos can see the smug-looking peony happily shielding her children and hear the people cheering for his ascension. But he himself is being held captive by the evil witch. His suffering doesn't end there as the queen imprisons him inside his room for 10 days. Her servant boy stares at her with suspicious blushing cheeks as he reports on the crown's prince condition. Peony wants to torture the boy more for disobeying her, hoping he would die of starvation and thirst. But she knows she has to use him to keep her children safe, so she decides to keep him alive for the next 5 years. Back to the present. Ursula is also troubled by recent events. Jane wants to make her happy, so she invites her to visit the library. Ursula only replies sadly, leaving Jane feeling like things are going bad. She is more worried about the king ignoring her for 9 months, to which Jane replies that it is actually quite a short time. Usually, some nobles even hide out for a few years just to avoid suspicion. Ursula suddenly becomes fierce, stating that the king should have prepared for such scenarios when he made the contract. The girl pats her chest, boldly saying she already expected things like this to happen. Jane reminds Ursula that she had almost died, and the king is never one to sacrifice his people for his sake. Ursula sees no point in staying, and Jane promises to help her speak to the emperor if she wants to leave. The girl who had made up her mind quickly changes it after thinking of the king, afraid he might need her again. 3 days later, the overactive Ursula is about to die of boredom. Since she has no one to feed, she can't even farm. So when Jane appears to invite her to the library again, she happily agrees this time. The maids dress her up in a pretty outfit while Ursula thinks this might be too much for a single trip. Nevertheless, she decides to go without changing, happily following Jane along. The two pass through the palace where Ursula notices that the atmosphere seems completely different from usual. She sees a familiar maid called Luina who hasn't appeared in the place for a long time. Ursula calls her over to ask about the details, but the maid can see Jane glaring at her behind. Still, she spills the truth, revealing that the king is hosting a banquet to search for an empress. She ignores the lady-in-waiting murderous looks, announcing that it is the first time he is holding such a party. The two maids share that the king is usually frugal, but this time, he seems to be going all out. As always, someone seems to be jealous of our heroine, as the maid Luina asks why she didn't receive an invitation since the king usually values her presence. Ursula pretends to be sad, saying she had really practiced her dance. But just as Luina feels smug, she reminds the maid that she is just a worker, effectively wiping that smug smile off the girl's annoying face. Over at our male lead's side, he is still drowning in his sad memories. He has just stepped out from his confinement, but the evil queen is already inviting him for a family meal. She is surprised by his stable condition, but when he becomes curious, she quickly changes the topic. As usual, the brain-dead king supports his evil wife, and the group soon begin to dine. Carlos tries to control the initiating stench that appears when the waiter serves him drinks. He finds the humans irritating and the food even more so. He feels like throwing up, but convinces himself that he can beat this since he has been practicing for 10 days. He forces himself to take a bite, knowing he has to overcome this for Ariana's sake. Yet, it seems he overestimated the stench as he soon began to retch. Peony can't hide her laughter and she happily sends everyone away. She mocks Carlos for trying to pretend when he can't even control himself. The woman calls her daughter over, squeezing Carlos's face and ordering him to confess his love for her. That way, he will be freed from the curse immediately. Over at Ursula's side, she pays a visit to Arta, before heading to the Imperial Library. Seeing her elaborate dress, he greets her with a mocking smile, addressing her as the high and mighty magician. Ursula isn't bothered by his mocking words because she has a favor to ask. She knows he has a charity foundation that distributes food and supplies to those in need. She wants to donate her crops, which surprises both Johnny and Arta. They point out that she grew them for the king, but since Emperor Carlos won't eat it, she wishes to donate everything, rather than letting it rot away. Arta finds her current look pitiful, and suggests that she come along with him on his next visit to the charity organization. That way, instead of only donating the crops, she can even cook for the people. Ursula immediately regains her excitement until Arta reveals that he also has a favor to ask. The previously nasty fellow suddenly grabs her hand, politely asking her to accompany him to the banquet. Arta earnestly asks Ursula to accompany him to the banquet, leaving the girl lost for words. The next moment, she instantly slaps his hand away while the man warns her not to look at him with such a disgusted face. Indeed, Arta is just trying to be a good person. Since Ursula wants to go to the banquet, he decides to bring her along. He can tell that the mage is really tempted, and while he laughs at her, the girl secretly thinks that he is quite a good person. Which is why she refuses to go because her presence will only bring more problems to his family. The group are all surprised by how rational Ursula seems to be. Just then, Johnny suggests that she put on a disguise with the use of transformation magic. This illusion magic isn't that difficult and only requires some little amount of mana depending on the individual. The men urge Ursula to use her magic, but she reveals that she can't use mana as easily as they think. As always, Arta disses her supposedly genius status, while the mage glares at him with a furious gaze. Jane interrupts the two, suggesting that they can just buy it instead at the magic store. Meanwhile, the story shifts back to the Emperor's tragic past, where his stepmother tries to convince him to admit his love for her own daughter. Carlos desperately wants to be comfortable and escape this pain, so he opens his mouth. The queen is already feeling smug, but the words she is expecting never come. Instead, the boy declares that he doesn't want to become a puppet. Peony suddenly looks cold, deciding that since the boy refuses to accept her offer, she can just ruin him. So when the king arrives, she immediately cries, calling Carlos a very bad child. The empty-brained emperor, without even stopping to use his senses, immediately kicks his own son in the face. Carlos slides almost 3 feet away, but his father chases after him, determined to teach him a lesson for making his beloved mistress sad. While the little Juliet still shows some empathy, her brother is busy admiring the blood. Peony only asks her husband to stop when she sees her daughter really doesn't want her toy to break. The stepmother even has the gall to laugh, along with totally evil son. She pulls Dale over to show Carlos that his father is always happy and enjoys being the puppet of her love. Back to the present, Ursula arrives at the magic shop with Jane and Arta. Inside, they begin searching through various magical items that can conceal Ursula's identity during the banquet. After carefully looking through the selection, Ursula is fortunate enough to discover a magical disguise suited for a young woman. The shopkeeper happily informs her that she is incredibly lucky, explaining that it is the very last one in stock, having only arrived the previous day. Ursula finds the mana familiar, but still buys the potion. However, when the others hear the price, they still gasp in pain. Still, Arta is glad because without the potion, she won't be able to attend the last day of the banquet tomorrow. Ursula still feels uncomfortable, thinking she shouldn't be attending, but the furious Arta immediately warns her not to show that pitiful expression. He reminds the mage of her promise to accompany him, making the girl finally agree to attend. Arta is pleased with her decision and leaves with a promise to pick her up tomorrow. The night of the long-awaited imperial banquet finally arrives. The imperial palace is filled with dazzling lights and countless nobles gathered from across the empire. Among the arriving guests is the young nobleman Arta, who enters the banquet hall accompanied by Ursula. Thanks to the magical disguise she purchased earlier, her appearance has changed enough to prevent most people from recognizing her. Even so, the moment they step into the ballroom, they immediately become the center of attention. The surrounding nobles begin whispering among themselves, surprised that has brought a female companion to such an important event. Since none of the nobles recognize the mysterious young woman by Arta's side, they begin making assumptions about her identity. Some remark that she doesn't look like she belongs to any prominent noble family, while others go even further, cruelly suggesting that she might be a former courtesan whom Arta has chosen to bring as his partner. Despite her disguise, Ursula cannot hide her nervousness. Rather than paying attention to the conversations around her, her eyes constantly wander through the crowded hall as though she is searching for someone. Watching her anxious behavior, Arta smiles knowingly and quietly teases her. He points out that she is making it painfully obvious that she is looking for Emperor Carlos. Embarrassed, Ursula immediately denies the accusation, insisting that she is not searching for His Majesty at all. Arta simply laughs and reminds her that, at least for tonight, she should remember that she is attending the banquet as his partner and not allow her attention to drift elsewhere. Not long afterward, Ursula's eyes finally settle on Emperor Carlos. Standing gracefully in the center of the ballroom, the emperor is sharing a dance with one of the noble ladies invited to the banquet. Inside the grand ballroom, Emperor Carlos gracefully shares the opening dance with Lady Shuel, one of the noblewomen attending the imperial banquet. As the couple glides across the dance floor, the surrounding nobles immediately begin whispering among themselves. Some nobles declare that Lady Shuel would make an excellent match for His Majesty, but others, however, are less enthusiastic. They quietly remind one another that Lady Shuel was once involved in a broken engagement, questioning whether someone with such a history would truly be chosen as the empire's empress. Their conversation reveals that Carlos had once been engaged to Shuel. Because his position as heir wasn't stable, Duke Narda had quickly broken off the engagement and sent his daughter off to study abroad. Ursula overhears their conversation, realizing that the engagement was actually broken by Shuel. Just then, the nobles point out that the king is dancing with all the ladies. He seems to be open to them all, which means he might really be desperate for a bride. While continuing the dance, Carlos's attention suddenly shifts. He notices a familiar figure standing among the guests, and even beneath the magical disguise, he immediately recognizes Ursula. The mage freezes in shock, worried that her disguise has been exposed. Thankfully, Arta quickly pulls her out for a walk, preventing her from getting caught. Carlos watches the couple sneak away, looking like he is about to chase after them. But before he takes a step, Lady Shuel gathers her courage and stops him. She has been desperate to figure out Carlos's true feelings and wants to know if they would have dated if the engagement hadn't been broken. The emperor can't lie to such a gentle girl and admits that he has always been the problem. This is his way of refusing her feelings. Shuel is unwilling, questioning him about his feelings if Ursula. She wants to know if the mage is any different. Carlos looks at the girl's face, which is covered by a black mist, and secretly scoffs. He excuses himself, while thinking that Ursula is very different. At least, she isn't tainted by the curse. Meanwhile, the mage is busy talking to Arta, unaware of the malicious look behind them. The man suggests that they change her name, but before they can decide on one, they are interrupted by the jealous king. Carlos leans down, questioning Ursula about her sudden presence. The girl believes he must have recognized her because of the curse, but she is unwilling to admit her identity. Afraid of drawing more attention, she proclaims that her name is Juan Alejandro. Carlos falls into deep shock, with mouth wide open, which causes Ursula to believe he is angry about her presence. She has no idea that the evil witch is right now, whispering in Carlos's ears. She mocks him with a cruel laugh, repeating that Ursula will never be special. She even feints the girl with her filth, determined to make the king live a life worse than death. Carlos glances at Ursula, but instead of an angry look, the mage can tell that he is upset. She quickly grabs his hand, saying they need to talk. With her sparkly purple eyes, she invites him to share a dance with her. Carlos is astonished while the rest of the crowd scold her for behaving rudely and touching the emperor. Ursula apologizes, but the king waves at the nagging crowd to be quiet. He wants to confirm from Arta if the mystery woman is really his relative. The boy insists that she is, saying he had brought her in only because she begged. Carlos finds it irrational, wondering if someone else can also relieve the curse. He already finds it suspicious until Ursula's words confirm his thoughts. They sound almost the same as her previous words, which makes Carlos certain that the woman is Ursula. The next moment, he sighs, then laughs loudly, grasping her hand and apologizing for not inviting her sooner. He even asks for her forgiveness, almost driving us crazy with his passionate gaze. Poor Ursula turns red and some steam even appears on her head. The two move to the dance floor where Carlos questions her sudden change in appearance. She explains that it is due to some transformation magic. Ursula apologizes for doing as she pleased, but felt she would never see him again if she didn't sneak in. She immediately becomes fierce, scolding Carlos for throwing her away like some object. She found this very upsetting. The man pulls her close with an apology, explaining that he was afraid to see her. Ursula thinks it is because of the arrow, but those are just outside issues. He admits with red ears that Ursula is too important to him and these new feelings are just too intense. The girl immediately buries her face in his arms, unable to resist such an innocent seduction. Meanwhile, everyone is gossiping about the couple and Shuel overhears their discussion. The people suggest that the emperor might be interested in the mystery girl, causing the pink-haired beauty to look very upset. The dance ends with Ursula feeling some regret over how short it was. Carlos kisses her hand, admitting it was great to see her. He suggests that they meet again soon, which Ursula finds surprising. The man reassures her with a happy smile, which shows he is really hoping to see her again. Ursula leaves the banquet with Arta, who asks if she is satisfied. She admits that her objectives have been fulfilled and thanks Arta for bringing her along. The two tease each other playfully, but they are interrupted by a fragile-looking Shuel. She asks to speak to Ursula, revealing that she already knows her identity. The women head somewhere private where the mage wants to know how she found out. Shuel points out that she is the only woman the king ever treated specially. Her comment makes Ursula uncomfortable, so she wants to end their discussion quickly. Shuel suddenly grabs her hand, begging her with a pitiful look to stay away from Carlos. The mage is confused by the sudden request until the girl reveals that falling in love makes the sun child gradually lose their sanity. Ursula is stunned to hear that the king would lose control of his sanity the moment he falls in love. A second later, she reacts, realizing that Shuel also knows about the curse. The noblewoman reveals that the king had told her himself. His curse is more like an open secret among the nobles of Lezepo. Everyone knows that the girl who wins the king's heart would one day control the whole empire. Ursula is still in doubt because Carlos had never mentioned any of this to her, but Shuel says she can also confirm this news with the king. She reveals that, as the son destined to bring Lezepo out of darkness, Carlos had sworn never to fall in love or lose himself. He might be a kind man, but he just doesn't have the space for another person. Yet, Shuel can tell that the king is falling for Ursula. She begins to cry, scolding the mage for stealing the empire's only son. She grabs Ursula with full force, begging her to leave if she really wants the best for Carlos. Our heroine moves Shuel's hands away, but instead of focusing on the girl, she recalls the king's words about being scared. He had pretty much just given her a confession. The noblewoman almost goes mad thinking that the king confessed to Ursula, until the mage assures her that it isn't the case. She points out that the love curse can only work if Carlos says a particular phrase or does some type of action. As long as he refrains from saying them, he would never lose control. She wipes Shuel's tears away, telling her not to worry because she would surely break the king's curse. The next day, Ursula is summoned to the palace where she meets the excited Evele. The two even share a big hug, although the secretary finds it awkward since she looks so different. Carlos appears and the mage teasingly points out that he called her straight away. She thanks him for keeping his promise, even though she had to transform just to visit. Carlos leans over, staring at Ursula until she forgets her words. He admits that he likes her better without her disguise and suggests she return to her true form whenever they are alone. Ursula reverts back to her familiar green-haired appearance and the happy king fondly pats her head. He admits that he missed her a lot, making the poor mage turn as red as a cherry. She also reveals that she missed him too, which is basically a confession of their feelings. Evele feels like an awkward third wheel, but he still has to interrupt because he has important news to share. The secretary plans to spread romantic rumors about the king and the so-called Suan. Carlos agrees with this idea, telling Ursula that she will have to transform a few times to support the rumors. Evele also wants to hold a charity ball for the two personas, which Ursula understands is his way of distracting their enemies. She is willing to fulfill their requests, since it is better than being ignored. The mage turns to Carlos with a dissatisfied look, furious he hadn't told her the full truth about the curse. She wants to know if he really loses his sanity when he falls in love, but Carlos is more concerned about how she found out. Although she doesn't think it is important, she finally admits that Shuel had told her. Carlos announces that he doesn't intend to fall in love, which makes Ursula curious about the conditions of the curse. He replies that he just has to confess his love. Once he does, the curse of the stink will disappear, but his lover will gain control over him forever. The mage says it is easy to avoid such conditions, but Carlos doesn't think the same. Since one word can get him out of this prison, the more he falls in love with a person, the less willing he would be to endure this hell. Meanwhile, dear Evele gets to work, and soon, rumors about the king's interest in Suan Aledro fill the papers. They announce the upcoming charity ball being held for the two women, Suan and Ursula, but disclose that the king has made a big donation for Suan. This is basically just declaring her as a potential empress candidate. Inside his study, Sam reads this news while feeling sorry for Ursula. He even calls Carlos a shameless breeding horse who is unworthy of the mage. He scratches his head in a display of madness, determined to show Ursula the king's true colors. He reveals a sleazy smile, hoping to save the pure, innocent Ursula from the devil's hold and make her his wife. Inside the Marquis's mansion, his subordinates are having a hard time. The butler not only has to endure the injury on his cheek, he also has to apologize to his crazy boss. Sam clearly isn't satisfied and wants to know exactly why the butler is sorry. The man calls himself a lowly subject who is unable to meet his boss's great and superior standard. Only then is Sam satisfied, releasing the man with a smug look. The crazy Marquis seems to be planning a banquet and asks his men to make it bigger than the imperial ball. He suddenly mentions getting an engagement ring and even plans to buy varieties in case his bride doesn't like one. Guys, this crazy man might be planning to force wed our heroine. The butler is worried about the cost, but his statement upsets the Marquis. He says there's no limit and asks his men to collect more taxes if the money isn't enough. The butler is secretly upset because the lord is already taxing too much. Yet, he can only watch as the culprit decides to visit the palace. The Marquis believes that Ursula is throwing this charity ball just because she wants to see him. He is full of happiness until his butler warns him to be careful about visiting the palace. His face immediately changes like that of a demon's, frightening the poor man into changing his sentence. Sam warns him to focus on the preparations while he does whatever he wants. Poor Ursula has no idea of her upcoming wedding. She is busy teaching Evele how to use the magic circle. The group is trying to find someone to impersonate Suan, and even though the circle works, there is a tiny problem. Evele's eyesight is just too horrible. Ursula has to give up on using him, but the next second, she switches to a new target. Soon, the poor male guard next to Carlos turns into the famous Suan. Evele tries to make the king act affectionate towards the man, but all Carlos can give is a very awkward smile. Ursula almost loses her soul from laughing, pointing out the awkward vibe between the two. Carlos, who had looked as stiff as a painting, now smiles lovingly at the sight of his beloved. Evele notices and with despair says they can't even use a woman. Their emperor is just too obvious about his affection. He suggests that Ursula play both roles since the nobles would only focus on the king anyway. The day of the charity ball arrives and Ursula attends the first event disguised as Suan. With the emperor by her side, the hall is filled with nobles who rush to show their support. Although the ladies resent the sudden appearance of this girl who stole the king's affection, they still have to accept that she might be the new empress. Ursula stares at the huge amount of gifts, thinking that the charity ball is going to be a success. She complains about how difficult it is to deal with people, while Carlos replies that it is easier with her by his side. The king even pulls her into his lap, causing her to turn red and the people to go wild with gossip. Evele quickly announces the end of the banquet, asking everyone to wait for Ursula's. He reminds the king about their meeting, while he urges Ursula to switch back to her true form. The mage goes off to change, but when she comes back, her face immediately becomes stiff. Even after waiting for 3 hours, the hall remains empty as no one shows up. Ursula calls the nobles materialistic while Jane tries to comfort her. The two ladies are lost in their anger and don't notice a creepy hand appearing from a portal. Just then, the door opens as a happy Sam arrives with some roses. Gina wastes no time in attacking and slashing Bouquet. He forbids the Marquis from approaching, causing Sam to give him a cold look. Ursula decides to step in, thinking the Marquis is here to donate. Instead, the man happily says he came to see his fairy. Ursula has no idea why this crazy fellow insists on torturing her. With a firm look, she replies that they aren't close enough for visits. Sam is shocked by her reply, dropping his bouquet as he asks for an explanation. Ursula doesn't sugarcoat her words, telling the Marquis that they have nothing between them. Still, he refuses to accept her rejection, insisting that she really liked his previous gift. The mage pulls back with a disgusted expression when she is reminded of the horrible dead bear. She calls it unpleasant and tells Sam that she never wants to see him again. Ignoring his heartbroken expression, she turns around to leave. The trembling Marquis suddenly bursts into tears, accusing Ursula of lying about her feelings. The mage, disgusted by his weird behavior, doesn't even spare him a glance. Sam can only watch her leave with an upset look, but the next moment, he becomes excited. He has somehow convinced himself that the Emperor must be forcing Ursula to reject him. He angrily insults Carlos, causing Gina to become enraged. He rushes to teach the Marquis a lesson, but instead, he receives an injury. The ladies watch with terrified eyes as countless black holes suddenly appear inside the hall. They run back to Gina's side, but he quickly orders Jane to escape with Ursula. He accuses the Marquis of planning a treason, but Sam tells him to move away if he wants a merciful death. Ursula is still worried about Gina, but Jane is already pulling her away. She tells the mage that the night is strong, and right now, Ursula's safety comes first. Gina watches the women leave before announcing that he will punish the Marquis for using dark magic. The ladies run around for quite some time before Jane notices that something is wrong. The palace is completely empty. Ursula explains that the dark magic has trapped them in a subspace. She is worried that things will get more dangerous if they stay here, so she offers to use her magic. Jane immediately protests, calling that the last resort. She asks for another option, so Ursula says they can kill the caster or find a space crack. Jane prefers the last option, asking Ursula to transform and find a crack, while she goes off to help Gina. Under the mage's confused gaze, her sword appears as she apologizes for deceiving Ursula. Lady Jane is actually a knight. The two separate and Ursula runs around the palace, now disguised as Suan. Although, that doesn't work well, since she is still wearing the same clothes. She tries to find the crack while wondering how the Marquis can use the forbidden dark magic. Just then, Ursula notices a certain room covered in dark aura. She steps inside and, just as expected, the mana flow is different. She even has to pick up a blanket because the air is just too cold. The mage searches around but only finds a painting of the evil Empress Peony. Before she can search further, the door opens as Sam appears. But instead of his Ursula, he is confused to see the famous Suan. Ursula immediately lies that she lost her way while worrying about her friends. She prays that the Marquis will be deceived, and for a moment, her wish seems to come true. The man comments on the painting, calling the former Empress a very beautiful woman. Ursula doesn't understand why he is suddenly talking about a painting and tries to use this chance to sneak away. The next second, Sam grabs her hand, lifting up a strange stone and uttering some weird language. The result is that the two begin to change, causing Sam to declare that they must be really fated. While Ursula returns to her natural green hair, Sam suddenly develops red eyes and hair. Standing against the painting of Peony, the two look very familiar. As expected, he reveals that his name is Jelos Aforni and gives an official proposal to Ursula, asking her to become his bride. Ursula is struck dumb by the familiar surname, and Jelos reveals with a hint of pride that he is part of her imperial family. Who knows? Ursula might just become the Empress if she marries him. Before the girl can't stage a protest, he pushes her into a black hole, shoving her back to his mansion while he tidies up his tracks. The mage's disappearance is soon noticed by Tanya, who leads a group of knights to search the mansion. She soon comes across the strange room where Ursula disappeared, and can clearly feel the mage's energy. Meanwhile, our heroine wakes up surrounded by a sweet scent, only to find herself lying in bed and wearing a gorgeous red dress. She looks exactly like a bride. Ursula has no idea where she is and is still confused as an eager old maid rushes to her side. The granny is about to explain when crazy Marquis finally appears. Jelos, who is no longer disguised as Sam, happily says he has been waiting for his bride to wake up. He is very pleased to see how gorgeous Ursula looks. Of course, our heroine can't accept this sudden title, jumping backwards and stating that she isn't his bride. The crazy Marquis isn't affected by this rejection and claims that she is just being shy. He suggests that, since they have a lot of time, they can get to know each other more. Ursula can't be bothered about this delusional man and is more worried about her friends. Jelos happily says they are all right, promising not to harm them since they are Ursula's friends. Of course, that will only happen if Ursula remains obedient. The mage turns pale with fright, reminding Jelos that this is kidnapping. Her words make the Marquis furious as he grabs her shoulders, claiming that he saved her. He insists that Carlos was just using her, unlike him who will love and protect her forever. Ursula rejects his proposal, instead begging him to let her go. Feeling furious, Jelos increases the force on her shoulders until she cries out in pain. He finally releases her, revealing red handprints which show the force of his grip. He tells Ursula that she doesn't seem to understand his words because from now on, she will remain by his side and they will build a future together. The mage realizes that the man is stuck in his own fantasy and no amount of words will get through to him. She decides to play along for now, asking Jelos to give her time to know him better. The man, shocked by her words, soon blushes like a baby. He promises to bring her so much fun and give her everything she wants. Ursula doesn't argue, only replying that she is feeling tired. The two make plans to hang out tomorrow, and the expectant Jelos prepares to leave. Before he heads out, he calls Ursula his love, but those words sound more like a threat. They make our fragile heroine shiver in fear, feeling like the Marquis is getting even creepier. Back at the palace, we see Evele repeating the news to Carlos, making the king go pale from fear. Unfortunately, Ursula isn't here to see her beloved's expression as she is caught the moment she tries to leave the room. The old granny from before is waiting outside, asking if Ursula needs anything else. The mage is secretly glad that Jellos didn't tie her up or place more knights over her. She stammers as she tries to think of a reply, while the maid urges her to share her thoughts. Ursula wonders if she can trust the maids until she recalls them sneaking out to call Jellos immediately. She woke up. Determined to save herself, she asks for the old clothes she was wearing. Unknown to others, the mage had hidden a healing stone from her master inside the jacket. She plans to heal Dame, Gina, and Jane, so the three can make their escape. Ursula earnestly prays for the maid to hand the clothes over, but she is destined to be disappointed. The old granny directly reveals that they burned them all. Ursula almost hears her ears ringing as the maid says she burned them all. Left with no choice, she wonders if she really has to give up on zodiac magic. The old maid urges her to head back inside while Ursula considers using her magic to escape. But once she recalls Carlos's handsome face, she immediately gives up on that idea. Just then, the women hear approaching footsteps as two greasy-looking knights appear. They instantly spot Ursula and jokingly comment that the fairy is wandering around. The mage watches with displeasure, unhappy that Jellos had placed knights on her. The two men seem to have no fear, commenting that Ursula looks more pretty now that she is dressed up. He even suggests that she came out to find a bed companion, causing the mage to label him as a man without honor. The old granny, unwilling to see the young girl face such torment, instantly lies that she came out to find some milk. She quickly urges Ursula to go back inside, but her actions make the guards furious. They assume that she is challenging their authority and raise a hand to teach her a lesson. Ursula moves on autopilot, shielding the old woman and taking the slap on the face. The force causes her to fall to her knees in pain as her eyes immediately fill with tears. The two guards are alarmed, especially when they see the blood on Ursula's face. Of course, they blame her for getting in the way, but our heroine isn't about to let them go. She calls the men fearless, threatening to tell the Marquis about her injury. Not only did they hurt his new wife, they even harassed her, causing her great harm. Knowing how crazy the Lord is, he would surely drag the men out to be executed. The knights, knowing that Ursula isn't wrong, immediately cower and beg for her forgiveness. The mage points out that she has no reason to forgive them, because she doesn't know if they will hit her again. The men call it a mistake, but Ursula wants something in exchange. She demands to know the location of her servants. The knights are unwilling to tattle, sharing an awkward glance before refusing her request. Ursula doesn't argue. She only holds her cheek in pain, while saying she can't grant them any favors. Still, the men remain silent at her threat, causing her to point out that they shouldn't be afraid. She calls herself a weak woman who can't possibly break out two knights that have already been imprisoned. She only wants to see their faces to make sure they are all right. The guards finally cave in and reveal the location to Ursula, but once the maid returns to her room, she instantly loses all her courage. The maid watches in shock as she falls to her knees and tries to comfort Ursula as she cries. After a good crying session, our heroine finally comes to her senses. While the old lady helps her apply some medicine, she asks why the granny seems used to the violence. Ursula can't understand how a noble house like Zeben could allow the second prince of Lazepo to become their marquis. The old lady sighs in despair, admitting that they used to be a noble household until everything changed one night. The former marquis had gone out on a cold, rainy day and suddenly returned with the second prince. He announced that Jellos would become his son from that day. The maid reveals that Peony was a childhood friend of their former marquis. When Carlos became the emperor, he ordered for Peony's death, leaving the old master in pain. As such, he took good care of the young boy, but no one thought it was strange because the old master had always been kind. But as time passed by, more strange events began to happen. The old master became weaker each passing day and would scream for Jellos to be by his side. As he got closer to dying, he even ignored his own son. He would only request for Jellos' presence, becoming excited when he saw the young boy. To everyone else, it was almost as if a demon had seduced their master. After the death of the former marquis, everyone discovered that he had left more of his inheritance to Sam than his own son. Still, the demon wasn't satisfied and greedily took over the other parts of the household. Bit by bit, he gobbled everything up until eventually even the marquis's son, Haben, died 2 years later. The old maid has no proof, but she is certain that Jellos must have killed her masters. Ursula explains that the crazy marquis is using the forbidden black magic by using a demon's heart as a medium to access its powers. Since he is also part of the royal family, he must have stolen it from the royal secret safe. Ursula, lost in thought, suddenly says this must be why Alexander was collecting the stones. The maid isn't the only one shocked, as Ursula also can't comprehend what she just said. Thankfully, the granny breaks the mood by handing over the pouch she was searching for. Ursula is glad to see her healing stone while the woman apologizes for not trusting her before. She assures the granny that it is fine, revealing her plans to escape after healing her knights. Ursula goes searching for the location described by the knights, only to discover an underground dungeon. She notices the dark and moldy air and almost faints from fright when she spots some blood. Our fragile mage finds this scene all too scary. She doesn't even notice how strange it is that there are no guards around and is just thankful when she spots the injured Gina. Ursula rushes to the cell, calling out the knight's name. The lady blinks her eyes open but scolds the mage for coming to such a dangerous place. She tries to persuade her to head back, but Ursula holds up her healing stone. She announces her plan to heal Gina, asking the knight if she can break free. Gina confirms that she can, and a worried Ursula asks about Jane. Unfortunately, the knight also has no idea, so Ursula can only go ahead to heal her. The revived knight snaps away her chains, then breaks the door open. She vows to protect Ursula from now on and wants to know if the mage trusts her. Ursula, with teary eyes, declares her trust for Gina and urges the knight to go find Jane. But instead of complying, Gina suddenly pulls Ursula into a hug. She mockingly squishes her face, calling her naive and asking what kind of prison would be so fragile. Right before our eyes, the so-called Gina transforms into Jelos. He mocks Ursula for being too trusting even though she is a mage. Because of her naivety, he has now captured her physical body. Ursula is terrified to see Jelos and realizes with horror that he has used a restraining curse on her. She can't move as the man holds her close, revealing his desires for her innocence. Thankfully, he decides to wait until the wedding, and with a snap of his hands, an evil-looking book appears. He reveals that he also wants to claim her body and soul, just like his mother, but he finds the process too difficult. The man has an evil grin, promising to claim her body forever when they kiss at the wedding. Meanwhile, back at the palace, Carlos receives an invitation to Jelos' sun banquet. Evele considers asking the Marquis to postpone his ball, but Carlos plans to use this chance to catch the spider. According to Peruse, the Marquis is involved in the secret schemes, plus he was also obsessed with Ursula. Thinking of his beloved, the Emperor crushes the invite, wondering where his mage might be. 3 days pass in a flash, and the day of the sun banquet finally arrives. The ballroom is filled with lavish decorations, which surprises even the king and his knights. They all share suspicious glances as they notice that the guests are all nobles from the capital. One of the men even bumps into the king, but before he can complain, he is scared away by the stern-looking knight. Carlos keeps the rest by his side while he orders Lanus to begin their operations. The assistant disappears into the crowd just as a troupe appears on stage. Everyone guesses that they are about to perform, but no one is prepared for the play they receive. The actor plays the part of King Dale, who announces that his true love was never Carlos's mother. Instead, he has always loved the young and beautiful Peony. The people murmur in shock while Carlos watches with a casual look. The actors continue their play, this time with a scene of the couple getting married. Everyone seems to be happy as the royal family are soon blessed with a son and a daughter. Carlos's furious guards wonder if they should stop the play, but our male lead chooses to keep watching. He wants to see exactly what the Marquis is planning. Back on stage, the scene changes as a servant announces a rebel attack. King Dale asks his wife to escape with their kids while he stays behind to fight the rebels. He manages to defeat them all and with a loud shout declares his victory. The crowd watching the play all burst into applause, moved by such a touching scene. But the drama isn't over as a new actor arrives. Carlos rushes to his father's side to show his concern, and when the king lets down his guard, stabs him right through the chest. He admits that he knew about the king's plan to pass the throne to Jelos, which was why he staged a rebellion. The furious king curses him as a traitor, but can only watch as Carlos slashes him again. The narrator takes over, accusing Carlos of killing his father just to seize the throne. They also blame him for murdering the empress and trying to kill her children. The nobles glance at the king, who is watching this play with furious eyes. His guard, unable to keep his cool, pulls out his sword. He orders the actors to stop, accusing them of insulting the empire's Sunday. Just then, a group of armed knights appear, trapping the king and his guards within their midst. Jelos also shows up in his true form, claiming that he is the real successor of the throne. Carlos is clearly shocked to see his brother, just like the rest of the crowd. They murmur in shock, realizing that the supposedly dead prince was actually the Marquis of Ziben. Carlos regrets leaving this pest alive and pulls out his sword. He is ready to attack Jelos if he plans to stage a revolt. The second prince laughs, saying this isn't a rebellion since he is only taking back what belongs to him. He plans to have his revenge on Carlos by also snatching away everything his brother has. Of course, this begins with Ursula. The evil prince pulls the mage to his side, presenting her to everyone as his future bride. The shocked king screams her name in panic but can only watch as Jelos pulls the mage close. He announces that today will be his wedding with Ursula and even asks the king to rejoice with them. After all, from the moment the wedding ends, Ursula will belong to him forever. Ralph, always observant, notices that something is wrong with the mage. He points this out to Carlos, who replies that they must save the witch. Jelos' knights immediately rush to defend their lord, their bodies glowing with some type of energy. But even when they use their strange sounds, they still can't match Sir Ralph. Carlos leaves the battle to his knights and flies towards Jelos, determined to take him down. But before he can get close, he is suddenly struck down by a huge snake. His knights rush to protect him while the crowd screams in fright. They try to run away from the monster, but discover that the doors are locked. The crazy Jelos insists that they must remain behind to watch his wedding. Meanwhile, Ralph suggests that the snake might be a high-level magical creature, leaving Carlos disgusted with the Blitz family. The second prince can't hide his smug look as he signals his priest to begin the wedding vows. Carlos tries to fight the huge snake, but slashing off its head only makes the monster grow 3 more. The priest has already started the vows, and the desperate king has no choice than to call his knights over. The men serve as a distraction while he focuses on slashing through the snake's body. Soon, he cracks the magical core hidden within its body, and the huge snake finally disappears. Jelos didn't expect his weapon to be easily defeated and calls his brother a monster. He hurries the priest to complete the vows, but it is too late as Carlos appears. Looking like a god of war, he commands his brother to let go of Ursala. Well, at least, Jelos isn't completely stupid. He knows his brother would surely end his life immediately. He lets go of the mage. Desperate to prove that he isn't as weak as before, he uses his magic to place a sword on Ursala's hand. With an evil smile, he orders the mage to kill his brother. Since the sword belongs to a very strong and evil ghost, Jelos is sure his brother won't be able to win. He even goes off to summon more magical creatures, advising Carlos to stay still so he won't hurt his bride. Carlos grits his teeth in fury because Jelos knows his weakness. He keeps dodging Ursala's fast attacks, trying to think of a way to suppress her without hurting her body. He even begins to panic when he notices the girl's tired face. Meanwhile, Jelos is happily summoning another demon. He grins like a maniac, feeling proud because his spell is almost complete. But soon, the smug smile on his face disappears with a flash of the sword. Jelos watches in shock as his book is cut in half. He sees the king hugging Ursala while pressing a sword right into his chest. Jelos collapses, and even at his moment of death, he can't believe how crazy his brother can be. Now that the tyrant is dead, Ursula soon regains her senses. She is surprised to see Carlos, who hugs her in happiness. The mage feels that her hand is uncomfortable, but when she takes a look, her eyes widen in horror. Her sword is clearly piercing through the king's chest. Ursula trembles in fear and even begins to cry when she sees the king bleeding. She tries to use her healing magic, but the king stops her, assuring her that he is fine. Just then, Ralph arrives, noticing that Jelos is dead. He too comforts Ursula, reassuring her that such an injury isn't enough to hurt the son. Carlos pulls out the sword himself while Ursula watches with teary eyes. She's still worried since the sword was made from a spirit, but the king still has the strength to make some jokes. He apologizes for dragging Ursula into such a frightening incident and with a happy smile, suggests that they head home. Ralph reports that they have cleared everything up and even found Gina and Jane. While the men converse, Ursula takes another look at Carlos's injury. This time, she notices that the wound is already closing up. Carlos grabs the girl's disobedient hand, giving her a little smile. Ursula also gives him a smile, and the two share loving looks. The knight feels like a giant third wheel, but still has to report about the nobles. They have rounded up the men related to Jelos, and are now waiting for the king's order. Carlos decides to handle the nobles himself and asks Ralph to take Ursula back to the palace. The knight pulls Ursula away, asking for her hand so they can teleport. The curious mage can't resist looking back, only to see the knights announcing the death penalty for the nobles' crimes. The men beg for mercy, but the only grace Carlos is going to show them is by personally cutting off their neck. Ralph pulls the distracted mage away just as the king draws his sword. The two teleport back to the palace, where they are met by an excited Evele. The secretary hugs Ursula tightly, which reveals how worried he was. He breaks the news that Jane and Gina were seriously injured. The mage can't hide her worry, but he comforts her that they are already being treated. Ralph also advises Ursula not to worry too much since the two are the Emperor's swords. He says they will recover fast, but the mage is worried about how painful it must be. The knight is amused by her concern and, after smirking, heads off to visit the two. Meanwhile, Evele grabs the girl's hands, begging her to stay hidden in the castle for now. He asks her not to be too shocked, because there is going to be a bloodbath. Ursula thought she understood those words until the king arrived covered in blood. Soon, articles were written about nobles being executed every day, and even the annoying Janet meets her end. The palace is also purged as the disloyal servants are taken away. Luina tries to guilt-trip Ursula into sparing her, claiming that she only did it for money. Instead, she is slapped in the face by a furious Jane, who blames her for aiding the dark side. The knight pulls Ursula away, while the girl finds the bloodbath too cold and scary. So many people have lost their lives and even more are injured. An example is Lady Jane, who we discover has also lost a finger. Our heroine is worried about her friend, but Jane insists that she is fine. Still, Ursula feels overwhelmed and decides to sit in the garden. She suddenly hears someone calling her name and turns around to see Carlos. The king wonders why she is all alone, but she claims that she is enjoying the wind. She is surprised that the busy lord could find time to see her, but he reveals that he is worried. He already knows that his little princess doesn't like the bloodshed. Our heroine still recalls the words the king had said during the hunting festival. He had explained that as long as predators remained in this world, he would have no choice than to hunt. Ursula finally understands those words because anywhere the sun shines brightly, there will always be darkness. Though she can't accept it all, she is still willing to remain with Carlos. The mage even holds his hand, causing the man to turn away in shame. He accuses Ursula of trying to seduce him, and we can even see his ears turn red. Ursula screams in panic, denying his serious accusation. She tries to free her hand from his grasp, but the stubborn emperor refuses to let her go. He even drags the girl over to his side until she is lying across his chest. The two share a glance, and our heroine can hear her heart racing. Her cheeks turn red from embarrassment as she questions Carlos's sudden actions. The man admits that hearing her say those words have given him the courage to keep going. Ursula feels her heart racing and accuses the king of seducing her this time around. Carlos insists that he is being serious and silently thinks to himself that he might be ready to give up everything. The next day arrives with a huge smile on Ursula's face. Our heroine just can't close her mouth and is always breaking out in a grin. Even Jane notices her sudden happiness, but Ursula blames it on the nice weather. The knight points out that the weather has always been nice, but the mage refuses to say anything more. Instead, she urges the knight to rush back to the palace so she can make some raspberry pie for the king. Ursula drags the chef over to help, and soon presents a beautiful-looking pie. She smirks as she imagines Carlos's cute face when he takes a bite, while the chef watches her in confusion. She happily heads over to visit Carlos, but is disappointed when she arrives. Evele comments that the king must be very tired since he has just fallen asleep. He guesses that Ursula is here to eat with Carlos and, feeling troubled, wonders if he should wake him up. The mage notices Carlos's peaceful face and decides to just wait for a while. Evele heads out to handle some business, leaving the couple alone in the room. Ursula pokes Carlos's cheeks, finding his vulnerable appearance very cute. Still, the man refuses to wake up, so she decides to take her time away by reading. Time passes by as a mountain of books appears by Ursula's side, yet the king refuses to wake up. The mage feels her stomach grumbling and decides that the wait is enough. She tries to wake Carlos up, but even after pinching his cheeks, the man still remains asleep. Our heroine is dumbfounded, wondering if the king has turned into the sleeping emperor. She blushes as she examines his face, but suddenly the door is pushed open. Evele returns, causing the guilty mage to fly backwards. She tries to avoid his gaze, but the secretary is more worried when he notices his boss is still asleep. He tries to wake Carlos up, but the emperor refuses to budge. Only then do the two realize that something is wrong as they order the guards to quickly fetch the palace physician. Ursula stares at the sleeping Carlos and soon notices a dark aura surrounding him. She realizes that it isn't just the imperial curse as her mind goes back to the spirit sword. Just then, the imperial physician arrives and an eager Evele explains that the king won't wake up. The woman does an examination but soon becomes confused. She can't notice any signs of fever or sickness and decides to draw some blood. By now, Ursula already has tears in her eyes as she voices out her suspicions. She blames herself because the king was stabbed by the spirit's knife while trying to save her. The doctor says the injury has healed, but Ursula explains that it isn't the case. Most injuries from a spirit sword won't heal so easily, but she had ignored that fact. She thought that Carlos would be okay because he is the son. The doctor decides to check, and just as Ursula guessed, the injury still has a dark stain. The mage begins to cry even faster, revealing that she was the one who stabbed the sword into his chest. Clearly, the rest aren't aware of this truth, but Evele guesses that she was controlled by Jelos's dark magic. He has no idea when the king would wake up, so he chooses to handle things according to protocol. The secretary calls for a meeting with the dukes, explaining the king's current condition. He asks the two lords to take control to prevent the political troubles. Duke Narda seems to have a grudge for Ursula, blaming her for the king's current condition. The other duke, Evelyn Katia, is also convinced that the mage must be the emperor's lover. Those words make Duke Narda furious as he declares that Ursula is just a commoner. Evelyn points out that the king has always been stubborn and won't care about his beloved's status. She wants to be sure that the king is not in danger, and Evele assures her that Carlos is just asleep. Evelyn believes that Carlos will survive and chooses to release a statement about the king going on vacation. Duke Narda also agrees with her suggestion but still demands that Ursula be punished. He says she might be working fellows and might actually be his spy. He even suspects that her kidnapping was just a ploy. Evele panics, knowing the mage will be punished if they find out about her attack on the king. He interrupts the dukes, explaining that Ursula was controlled by Jelos's dark magic. Sir Ralph also supports his claim, and the two even lie that she was unconscious when they found her. Evele mentions that Ursula was brought to the palace under the king's orders and, right now, is helping the palace physician find a cure for his illness. Duke Narda isn't convinced, pointing out that she could have healed the king with her magic if she was so capable. Evelyn also doesn't trust the mage, and while she won't make her leave, she forbids Ursula from seeing the king until he wakes up. Evele relays this news to Ursula, assuring her that she only has to wait until Carlos awakens. The mage says it has already been 3 days and he still hasn't woken up. She makes up her mind to give up her zodiac magic so she can heal the king. Evele refuses, explaining that even if she gives up her magic, she can't see the king without the duke's permission. Plus, the palace's magicians have also tried their healing magic, but nothing seems to be physically wrong with the king. Ursula insists that she can try, but Evele persuades her to wait. In a month, she will be able to use her zodiac magic. Just as she said, the king will be able to break the spirit sword without the imperial curse. He urges her to trust in the king, but Ursula still doesn't feel comforted. Just then, Duke Katia arrives, and Ursula greets her with a proper curtsy. The woman isn't impressed, stating that Ursula has an uncertain identity, so she can't be allowed to stay by the king's side. She is even forbidden from coming near the imperial palace. Our heroine is unwilling and chooses to earn the duke's trust instead. The woman smirks and calls her bold. She has only one request for Ursula. The mage has to cure the ongoing pandemic ravaging the state. Ursula is confused because she hasn't heard about the epidemic. Meanwhile, Evele is certain the request was just a silent refusal. A contagious disease has been spreading around the capital recently, causing many deaths. Something so dangerous can't be handled by a single mage. Still, Ursula insists on trying, which frightens the assistant. He points out that she could get infected, and then she won't be able to see His Majesty forever. The mage sternly replies that she is the Grand Witch's apprentice. Since she has learnt the ways of the Guardian, it is her duty to protect the king and the people. Evele can't win against Ursula, so a few days later, a carriage is prepared for her journey. Arta is also coming along, and he reveals that the disease has almost reached the capital. He hands Ursula a mask with a defensive spell, but she is doubtful about its abilities. The noble assures her it can protect them since none of the volunteers have been infected. They head out of the capital, and our heroine is immediately shocked by the sight. The whole village is deserted with only a few people roaming around. Arta explains that a lot of villagers have caught the disease and leads Ursula to the house of a patient with the strongest symptoms. A sick-looking woman opens the door, and Arta introduces Ursula as an expert. She allows them inside, bringing them along to see her mother. The woman has been unconscious for 3 days, and our heroine steps closer to take a look. The patient's eyes are deeply set with a yellow face, and her hands and legs have turned blue. Ursula also notices some red spots across her stomach and, for a moment, finds these symptoms familiar. Arta eagerly asks if she knows the disease and if the king shares the same symptoms. Ursula replies that the king's sickness is different, but something about the pandemic just keeps bothering her. She is pulled out of her thoughts by the daughter who wants to know if she can treat her mother. Ursula still has to do some research, so she just gives the girl a potion to feed to her mother. Arta also discloses that this potion will be shared to the sick from now on. They return to the carriage where Ursula confesses that something is strange. Arta wonders if she noticed anything, and she admits that the disease looks familiar. The boy is confused because she had earlier said that she knew nothing about the sickness. Ursula feels like she knows something, but her head keeps aching. She can also tell that she is acting strange, but the patient's eyes just look too familiar. Immediately, they return to the palace. The mage heads to the library. She thinks she might have seen the symptoms in a book and now tries to find the material. Ursula searches through all the medical books but can't find a single clue. She gives up, reasoning that the palace has the best doctors and chemists. If the epidemic was really detailed in a book, they would have created an antidote already. Still, the sense of familiarity refuses to leave her, causing Ursula to take another look. She spots a book about thinking outside the box, and this gives our heroine a clue. She has been searching through the medical journals, thinking the epidemic was an infectious disease, but once she moves to another section, she immediately finds what she was searching for. The mage pulls out an old book, and just like she guessed, the symptoms are written inside, except it isn't an infectious disease, but a poison used in ancient times. Ursula realizes with horror that someone must be poisoning the capital. She doesn't even notice the stranger sneaking up on her until he grabs her wrist. The man wonders if she can read the book while also asking if she works here. Our heroine admits that she can, but the stranger finds it impossible. The book is written in an ancient language that only about 10 people in the Empire can read. He guesses that she might be a professional Drunier, but Ursula shuts down those claims. Still, the man is intent on figuring out her identity, which makes the mage annoyed. After saying it is none of his business, she rushes away to attend to her duties. The stranger is left alone, feeling sad that she hadn't told him her name. Ursula forgets this incident as she quickly heads into town. She can hear the people complaining about the expensive prices and wailing that the capital is doomed. The epidemic is even affecting the animals and crops. They blame the emperor, wondering what he is doing while the empire is falling. Some even spread the news about his curse, insisting that the empire has been cursed because of him. Our heroine returns to a small house where Arta is waiting for her. He eagerly asks if she found the ingredients for the antidote, but all Ursula provides is a small sack. Apparently, some merchant had secretly bought all the ingredients recently. Ursula already guessed that the culprit will know the antidote, but a righteous Jane is angry that the men are only going to save themselves. The nobleman quickly tells her his brother is already investigating the criminal. He wants to know how much antidote they can make, but Ursula replies they need more ingredients. Still, she tries her best and eventually produces 3 bottles. Arta naively asks if they should spread this across the capital, until Ursula reveals that a bottle can only cure 1 patient. The nobleman is disappointed, but she assures him that this is just a trial. They need to first confirm that this is poison because they need to earn the Duchess's trust before they can do anything else. The mage feeds the potion to the patient and the woman soon recovers. After confirming that it is poison, they hand over their results to the Duchess. As always, Duke Narda tries to oppose Ursula, pointing out that no one can read the ancient language. He accuses the mage of making things up, but the girl replies that her antidote already worked on a patient. She even suggests bringing the woman over, but Evelyn already trusts her results. She believes that the king's action of killing the traitors must have forced one of them to retaliate. The Duchess knows they must act fast, so she decides to help Ursula. She abandons the rest of her duties to the Duke while immediately heading off with the mage. Under Evelyn's commands, several guards are stationed at the canals. She also joins hands with the Swaggin family to catch the culprit, leaving our heroine with a lot of free time. Of course, she immediately visits her beloved only for the palace physician to announce that Carlos has gotten worse. The black stain has spread across his heart, but at least the doctor has also found out the cause. During a previous assassination attack, he was stabbed by a poisonous sword made from Acania. The demon's poison uses its host as a vessel to evolve itself. Once the victim dies, the poison would use their dead body to bloom its flowers. Ursula watches her sleeping emperor in despair. She might have heard about the curse of Acania, but this is her first time seeing its effects. The physician mentions that she has been searching for a cure, but Ursula reveals that there is none. Suddenly, our heroine seems to recall a scene from the past and happily announces that there might be a cure. A quick flashback to 10 years ago shows us little Ursula trying to study a drawing. The next moment, she tosses the paper in despair, insisting that it is impossible to make a relic by just looking at a drawing. Her stern master orders her to pick it up, and the mage has no choice but to obey. She apologizes to her master, while the Grand Witch tells her not to overthink. She keeps saying that Ursula already knows how to make the relic and asks the girl to trust herself. The mage replies that she only knows the theory, but her master suggests that she keeps trying even if she fails. The furious Ursula protests, and she will have to wait a whole year before she can try again. Her master might not find it hard, but our heroine is just an ordinary human. If she keeps failing again and again, she will become an average magician. The thought of failing makes Ursula upset because she is the Grand Witch's apprentice. She is afraid that her repeated failure will also ruin her master's reputation. Arbonne stops the girl from falling into despair, telling Ursula that she is far stronger and braver than she looks. She suddenly says that out of all the other Ursulas, the current mage is the most similar. The Grand Witch offers to help her, but our poor heroine has no idea what she is saying. Back to the present, Ursula reveals that the relic she made was a part of the Eye of the Angel. It was made by the Grand Witch 500 years ago to destroy the poison, Acania. Ursula could only study its drawing in the past because it's a palace treasure. Jane and Evely are a bit distrusting of this so-called relic, so Ursula explains that it has just run out of energy. She grasps the purple ball, feeling relieved because she thought it might not exist. But now she faces another problem. The relic she made before is probably with her master. Usually, the Grand Witch would give her certain items in advance, since she has the gift of foresight. But now her master isn't even replying to her letters. Just then, Evely interrupts her complaints, mentioning that a visitor had come looking for her 2 days ago. The man claimed that he was sent by the Grand Witch, but the suspicious secretary ordered the knights to lock him up. Now, he mentions this incident to Ursula, who screams in shock. Turns out the man, Aaron, is actually her friend. Soon, the boy is brought over and begins to bawl immediately. He notices Ursula. The mage gives him a big hug, knowing the poor boy must have been frightened. Meanwhile, little Evely is about to die of guilt. Finally, the chaos ends as Aaron pulls out a little sack Arbonne had asked him to bring. Ursula pulls it open, revealing a relic that looks like a purple heart. It is the piece she made with her magic, and she hurries to place it in the eye of an angel. Immediately, the little ball begins to float, and suddenly breaks apart. Ursula is stunned, her eyes reflecting the strange leaf glowing in the middle of the ball. She grabs a piece, making the ball glow and glue back together. Evely is pleased, thinking the mage must have succeeded. He keeps calling out to Ursula, but she doesn't give a reply. Instead, the magical ball suddenly releases a glowing light. The ball glows as brightly as the sun, and its radiance covers Ursula. Suddenly, she points at the windows, causing them to burst open. The frightened Evely watches in disbelief as the ball and the mage fly out through the window. He rushes after her, screaming her name in fear, but it is already too late. Evely quickly orders the knights to follow her since she seems to be heading to the rooftop. Meanwhile, the people in the capital have gathered around the palace for an explanation. They are all shocked when they discover that the epidemic is actually a poison. They demand to know the true culprits and ask for a cure. The knight admits that they're still researching the cure, causing the people to cry out in protest. They can only appease them with some recovery potion and order everyone to get in line. Suddenly, a bright light flashes through the sky, almost blinding everyone and forcing them to shield their eyes. The people gossip as they point at the glowing energy until they realize that it is actually a person. We discover that it is our dear Ursula, and somehow, she has even grown a pair of wings. She even receives a vision about the past. 500 years ago, the Acania curse threatened to swallow all mankind. Left with no choice, our heroine has to use a piece of her soul to stop the poison. We suddenly see the people Ursula had seen in her previous visions. But even more surprising, she calls the white-haired woman her sister. The lady blinks, saying she is fine with this sacrifice. As if the plot twists aren't enough, she suddenly calls Ursula, Arbonne! The trance ends and our heroine wakes up in midair. She is still shocked by the sudden flashback and can't believe she is the Grand Witch Arbonne. Although she tries to resist, Ursula can feel that this relic was made with a piece of her soul. She is suddenly confused, trying to figure out her teacher's true identity. But our heroine has no time for those thoughts. The people below cry for her help, so she focuses on healing their illness. The mage reasons that since she can detox the evolving Akania, she should be able to heal other kinds of poison. She releases some blue feathers into the air, which heals everyone it touches. The people are all excited, calling Ursala an angel and showing their gratitude. Just then, Lanus finally notices that the angel is actually Ursala. She is confused by the sudden change, until the mage explains that she found a way to cure the poison. She flies around the whole city while the people spread the news that the spring lover, Ursala, is actually an angel. Our heroine has never used such a full-scale magic that can cover the whole empire. She doesn't know what is going on, but she can feel that this is actually her magic. Soon, the whole empire is covered with those blue feathers, and even the sleeping Carlos finally awakens. The physician is shocked while Evele almost cries in relief. They inform the king that he was asleep for 2 weeks, but thanks to Ursula, his life and the empire are saved. Carlos immediately asks for his beloved, but is told that she is still healing the people. The detox only ends in the evening, and the tired mage rushes back to the palace to save the emperor. But even from a mile away, she can already hear Carlos calling her name. Ursala immediately becomes teary-eyed and happily flies into her lover's embrace. The next day, the papers are filled with the news about the angel. They announce Ursala's identity as the king's lover, calling her a saintess and praising her for saving the lives of the people. They also reveal that the poison was spread by the families punished for embezzlement and treason. Count Farune's surviving family had tried to take their revenge by poisoning the capital. Duke Katia reads the papers, happily calling Ursala an angel. She really wants to know how the king found such a competent mage. Carlos replies that he is lucky and thanks the dukes for upholding the empire. Evelyn declares that she is on his side and even encourages him to get married to Ursala. After all, a saintess is quite worthy to become his partner. Duke Narda loses his cool, claiming that Ursula is no saintess. She had only used the ancient relic to save the people. The Duchess knows he is only protesting because he wants his daughter to be empress. The Duke doesn't hide his desires, declaring that only his daughter is fit to be Carlos's partner. Our male lead frowns because the two suddenly change the topic, and now Evelyn wants to introduce her son to Shuel. The king immediately chases the two outside to continue their discussion. Meanwhile, the new saintess is holding her head and groaning in pain. Jane is worried about her mistress, but Ursula can't admit that she might be the Grand Witch. She insists that nothing is wrong, but Jane is still worried. She encourages Ursula to hang out with her friend from the village, hoping the girl's mood might improve a bit. Our heroine goes looking for Aaron, only to see him working with Johnny. He happily boasts that he got a job with the palace's farming department. Ursula is pleased to see the close relationship between the men, but she has more important questions to ask. She pulls Aaron away, asking him to repeat everything her teacher said, including the minor details. Unfortunately, her master didn't say anything strange to the villager. The curious Johnny glances back, only to see Ursula whispering something into Aaron's ears. The boy immediately laughs, calling her words a funny joke. The mage returns home with a defeated expression, wondering if her teacher was only deceiving her. She refuses to believe that scenario, because she is certain that her master was a great magician. Plus, she also had incredible foresight. But soon our heroine pauses, as she realizes that her master's magic isn't as strong as hers. She might try to lie to herself, but her soul already knows the truth. She is really the Grand Witch, Arbonne. Ursala can't understand why her teacher deceived her or why she would curse the royal family. Since she can't remember anything about the past, she decides to do some research. The mage heads to the library and begins to read a load of books. But soon, she collapses in despair because she can't find any information. Just then, the curious stranger appears and, seeing Ursala's troubled expression, offers his help. He can tell that Ursala is interested in the Empire's early days and reveals with some pride that he is a historian. He offers to tell her anything she wants to know in exchange for her name. The mage then asks him to mention a secret about the Grand Witch Arbonne that nobody knows. The man states that the Lazepo Empire was built upon the blood of thousands. Humans, demons, and even magical creatures were killed to build this country. He can't understand how the Grand Witch Arbonne, who was God's child and also a mystical creature, could kill thousands of lives just to aid the Sun King. The historian moves closer, whispering to Ursala that the royal family is cursed. He is certain that the curse was placed by the Grand Witch because no one else would dare to harm the Imperials. Ursala turns away in shame but still wants to know what the cursed person would think of the Grand Witch. The historian replies that a curse brings disaster and misfortune, which means the Grand Witch must have hated their bloodline a lot. If he was Carlos, he would actually want to kill the Grand Witch because she cursed him for a crime he did not commit. The mage sinks into despair, yet she knows that feeling is only natural. The man is still interested in knowing her name, but before she can reply, the king suddenly appears. The two are stunned into silence, while Carlos calls the mage over with a dark face. Even when the historian gives him a greeting, he keeps releasing a dark, moody aura. Our male lead demands to know his identity, and the boy finally reveals that he is Louis, the second son of Duke Katia. Carlos realizes that this must be the son who went abroad to study. Louis eagerly glances at Ursala until she also shares her name with him. She thanks him for his help, and the man replies that he had a great time with her. Our jealous emperor is about to turn the whole place dark with his huge amount of dark aura. He even gives the poor boy a threatening glance as he leaves, making Louis decide that he is scary. The couple take a walk around the garden, with Ursula asking the king about his purpose for visiting. Carlos, noticing the girl's gloomy mood, suddenly wonders if he was interrupting anything. He had gone searching for her at the farm, only for Johnny to suggest that something might be going on between Ursula and Aaron. Even though she revealed that they are just childhood friends, he still thinks the two are too close. Carlos recalls those words and thinks he might have interrupted her time with Louis. Our heroine notices his cute, nervous face and can immediately tell that her man is jealous. The stubborn king turns away in denial, but his cute behavior makes Ursula smile. To reassure him, she grabs his hand and holds it tight, an action that makes both their faces turn red. The couple head to the rooftop while Ursula stares at Carlos. She suddenly calls his name, making the man turn around with a happy smile. Our heroine really wants to tell Carlos that she likes him a lot, but instead she admits her identity as the Grand Witch Arbonne. The emperor is stunned into silence and watches the mage with wide eyes. Ursula seems to gain some courage, revealing that she was the witch who cursed his whole bloodline. The mage explains that she only recently found out the truth and wasn't trying to deceive him all along. Still, that doesn't make it easier for Carlos as he turns his face away in despair. He suddenly wants to know why Ursula came looking for him in the first place. The mage hurriedly insists that she came to help him, but because she doesn't have her memories, she doesn't know why she cursed him. She apologizes for making him suffer, but Carlos isn't interested in those words. He only wants these meaningless chains of curses to come to an end. He finds it disturbing that the person who cursed doesn't know why she laid the curse. She doesn't even recall the reason for her hatred. He even thinks they might be repeating the same sequence by falling for each other again. Carlos asks Ursula if she trusts herself, but the girl hesitates. She finally gains the courage, admitting that she trusts her heart, which completely belongs to him. The mage confesses her love, leaving Carlos in shock. He admits that he also wants to give up everything, but he can't abandon his empire. Therefore, he will never return Ursula's feelings. After that dreadful day, a month passes by until the day of the curse breaking finally arrives. A cheerful Eveille wants to know how Ursula feels, but the mage says she is okay. She can tell that Carlos didn't reveal her identity as the Grand Witch to the rest of their friends. Eveille jokingly says she must be nervous because she will have to wait for another year if she fails again. But the mage knows she can't afford to fail no matter what. She knows this is her only chance because the king will never allow her to stay by his side again. Ursula arrives before Carlos, who wants to know if she can fulfill the promise she made a year ago. The mage promises to set things right, and the two share a secret smile. Soon, she pulls out her staff and activates her zodiac magic. Just like last time, Ursula appears before a door, but this time the gate is bigger and creepy. She realizes that there were 2 layers to the cursed door, but is certain that this must be the last. Our heroine pushes the door open, only to be blinded by a dazzling light. She seems to have returned to her dreams, where a white-haired woman is trying to wake her up. The 2 ladies seem to be in some type of garden, and the woman with white hair says today is the day. Our heroine discovers that she can't move and can only watch as Arbonne finally wakes up with complaints. They rush towards a tree which they address as the world tree Gaia. Arbonne calls her mother, wailing that she doesn't want to leave. The tree says they have to go for the sake of world balance, but Arbonne protests. She doesn't have a sense of duty, and besides, she doesn't like war. Suddenly, she calls the white-haired lady Ursula, addressing her as her sister. Our heroine is still in shock just as the world tree announces that it is time. We can also see Alex approaching. The emperor kisses Ursula on the hand, while the world tree gives them her blessings. She feels sorry for passing this destiny down to her daughters, but they have no choice but to save the world. Our heroine watches the scenes replay as she visits the human world for the first time and even gets into fights with Alex. She can slowly feel all her memories and emotions rushing back. She recalls a conversation with her sister about her feelings for Alex. Ursula can see the future, and even though she already expected these feelings, it still feels strange. She pats Arbonne's cheek, reminding her that love is fated. Even though they know the future, they can never escape it. Ursula prophesizes that the Grand Witch will also meet a golden lion who will save her life. Arbonne is doubtful, but her teary-eyed sister insists. Ursula even mentions that they look good together while the mage complains about her complex words. The scene shifts as we see Arbonne begging the king to stop advancing. She points out that the demons have fled and she has already restored the world's balance. Alex says the demons might come back one day, so he refuses to retreat. He plans to build a powerful empire that no one will be able to defeat. Suddenly, Ursula breaks the silence, revealing a pair of eyes colored like stars. She agrees with Alex, calling this their only chance. Arbonne isn't convinced, asking just how long they have to keep fighting. She points out that her sister only has to sit back and look into the future, while she gets covered in blood every day. With tears in her eyes, she begs Ursula to return home with her. The lady refuses, and as she stands up, we discover that she is actually pregnant. She persuades Arbonne to keep going for just 1 year, after which the empire will be established. Ursula gives her sister a hug, apologizing for using her against her will. Finally, a year passes by, and the 3 return home victorious. Still, our heroine isn't pleased with Alex, and believes he only built the empire to satisfy his selfish desire. The mage wonders sadly if it is her fate to be stained with blood. Just then, an adorable little girl calls her name, giving her a flower and thanking her for saving their lives. That little bouquet is all it takes to make our heroine smile again. The sisters retire to their room where Arbonne complains about Alex having a great time. The man even plans to throw a banquet named after himself. Ursula smiles, begging her sister not to hate Alex too much. The mage teases her little niece, mentioning her sister's upcoming wedding with Alex. She is prepared to return home alone and even jokes about kidnapping Suan back home to show their mother. Suddenly, Ursula breaks the light atmosphere, telling Arbonne to visit their mother immediately the sun rises. Our heroine is confused and afraid of missing the banquet, but her sister insists that something bad will happen to their mother. She assures Arbonne that she can return on the last day of the banquet. The mage is anxious about their mother's safety, but Ursula refuses to say anything else. She only asks Arbonne to leave tomorrow and be very careful. The home of the world tree Gaia isn't accessible to ordinary humans. She lives in a fairy world hidden behind mysterious lakes and mountains. Even a demigod like Arbonne struggles to get here, so it makes no sense that Alex could easily enter. The mage spots an approaching fairy and immediately inquires about her mother. She mentions the upcoming tragedy, but Safine is also confused. Arbonne decides to rush back to check on Gaia, only to almost be struck down by a sudden wind. She realizes that she got here too late as she can feel her mother's sadness. The harsh wind stops as suddenly as it started and Arbonne can finally approach. She doesn't spot any intruders, so she is confused about what happened. Just then, the rain begins to fall, which might also be Gaia's tears. With a heart full of pain, she reveals that Arbonne's other half has withered. Our heroine is shocked, unable to believe that her sister, Ursula, is dead. Her eyes fill with tears as she insists that her sister is getting married soon. She has even given birth to a granddaughter. The world tree sighs, asking the mage to go back and save Suan. Arbonne is still in disbelief, but her mother has already opened a pathway for her. She begs the mage not to commit any more killings. Arbonne is transported back to their room in the king's palace. She finds the palace empty and thinks her mother must be talking nonsense. After all, Ursula must be at the ball. But just then, our heroine notices the blood-stained sheets and is certain that the blood belongs to her own sister. While she is distracted, some knights suddenly appear from the darkness and try to stab her. Arbonne dodges their attack, while using her magic to control their bodies. She assumes that the men must be enemies from the soldier camp who killed her sister. But soon, she spots a familiar face among the men and realizes that they are knights from the King's Order of the Sun. Arbonne trembles in rage, asking the men to explain what happened. The knights refuse to say a word and instead ask her to kill them. Since they refuse to speak, the witch uses her magic on them, and soon the men confess the truth. Alex had actually asked them to kill Ursula because she can see the future. The truth leaves Arbonne in shock as she recalls the man's deceitful words towards her sister. The mage's face immediately darkens in anger. Our heroine watches in tears as her past self mourns the loss of her sister. She thinks Ursula was foolish to fall in love with humans because they are even worse than the demons. Arbonne activates her magic, ready to make the men pay for killing her sister. Thankfully, little Safine arrives, stopping the mage from making a grave mistake. She urges her to recall her mother's words, reminding her that there will be no going back if she takes another life. The mage squeezes her staff in frustration but still gives up on harming the men. She realizes from their words that her little niece is still alive. Arbonne teleports to Swan's bedroom, leaving a trail of mud behind her footsteps. She sees the baby sleeping with tears around her eyes and a little flower placed by her side. The Grand Witch grasps the flower, which seems to be Ursula's true form. She cries as she hugs her sister's body close to her chest. The mage lifts the baby with her magic, and the little fairy suggests that they head home. Arbonne stares into Suan's face, recalling the happy days she spent with her sister. Her tears begin to fall even faster, as she is filled with a sense of unwillingness. She apologizes to the fairy because she can't quell her anger. Arbonne swears on her soul to curse the ones responsible for her sadness. A dark wind blows around the mage, causing Safine to cry out in despair. Still, it is too late as Arbonne swallows them into her being. She begs for power to destroy the ones that stole her light, and just as she wished, she turns into a dark mage. Meanwhile, Alex is enjoying his ball while the people gossip about who will be his first empress. They all know that the king likes women with pretty eyes. One of the girls shares the rumors about the king's secret lover and mocks Ursula for being blind. Even her skill of seeing into the future becomes something ominous. Just then, Arbonne arrives completely covered in mud. The people all stare in shock, gossiping and calling her a filthy witch. The mage ignores their ugly murmurs, instead focusing only on the emperor. She questions him for betraying Ursula, reminding him of the promises he made to the daughter of the tree. The emperor dismisses her feelings, saying he can't care about a simple flower. His disdain drives Arbonne mad as she wonders who he really is. It almost seems like the Alex she knew in the past never existed. The true Alex is just a demon that can betray his lover. Because of this, she swears that his greedy bloodline will be cursed for eternity. After those words, the Grand Witch turns into a flower, disappearing into the mud. The trance finally ends, and we see a pitiful Ursula kneeling on the floor. Our heroine cries pitifully as she is filled with hatred. She makes up her mind to curse the child of the sun and watch him suffer forever. As Ursula cries before the cursed door, her body in the outside world begins to change. The guards notice that something is wrong because mud is suddenly appearing everywhere. Carlos jumps to his feet in fright, calling his beloved's name. Yet, before he can approach, a voice orders him to stop. Ursula's teacher arrives and says the timing isn't right. The men are shocked by her presence until she introduces herself. Carlos then poses a question. Since Ursula is actually the Grand Witch Arbanet, what is the true identity of her so-called teacher? Meanwhile, our heroine is still recalling her past memories. After laying the curse, she returns home with Suan and Safine. The fairy scolds her for ruining everything, but Arbanet's only reply is to change her name. From now on, she wants to be known as Ursula. Safine is confused as she can't understand why the witch keeps crying. She begs her to return home, but Ursula refuses. She plans to watch the bloodline of the sun perish before her very eyes. Safine is startled as she realizes that Arbanet has lost herself because of the curse. She tries to convince the mage to return home for the sake of the baby. After all, their mother, Gaia, needs to see her grandchild. Arbanet lies beside her niece, explaining that Suan is just a normal human. Besides, her body has been corrupted, so she can't enter into the fairy world. She apologizes for dragging Safine into this mess. Ursula keeps recalling those memories, making the mud spread even faster. She keeps repeating that she was the flower betrayed by the sun. Right now, all the guards have fainted, and Carlos is also bound by the teacher's great magic. After realizing that he isn't a match for her, he questions the woman's true intentions. The witch says she wants to protect Ursula, but Carlos begs her to stop. He points out that the girl is in pain and her face has even turned dark from the mud. The teacher doesn't look too worried, even mentioning that Ursula might die today. When Carlos screams in shock, she says there is nothing he can do. After all, his empire is more important to him than his life or Ursula. The witch can't understand why he works so hard for such a useless empire. He is just like his ancestor who also chose his country and killed the flower out of greed. Carlos thinks she is talking about Ursula, but she says the flower was the one who died. The world tree actually had two daughters, the flower and the branch. Carlos finally realizes that Ursula cursed his family just to take revenge. The teacher says the Grand Witch was even merciful. She had given the men a chance. If the successor should choose love, they will be free from their suffering. Meanwhile, she had to bear the punishment for cursing the one blessed by the sun god. Also, Ursula wasn't the type to continue cursing the family's descendants. She even tried to lift the curse, but failed because the conditions were very strict. The Grand Witch couldn't bear the guilt and had to be reborn every time a new successor appeared. Each time, she would lose her memories and would only recall the past as time gradually passed by. The teacher faces Carlos, saying it is now his turn to escape the eternal curse. She reveals that he is the only emperor who didn't choose love, but she doesn't believe he can stick to his convictions. After all, Ursula can only be saved if he gives up his empire and chooses love. Carlos can't believe this woman is here to protect Ursula, but the witch replies that she is teaching him how to save the mage. She can't solve the problems on their behalf because the couple have to deal with their fate alone. Meanwhile, back at the portal, Ursula is still kneeling before the cursed door. The mud around her takes on the faces of the sun's descendants and she strangles them all. She wishes their greedy bloodline could perish and blames them for their misfortune. All they had to do was give up the throne. But soon, our heroine pauses because the mud takes on the face of Carlos. She immediately lets go, apologizing for going too far. Just then, the mud changes form and becomes the darkened version of Arbanet. She clutches Ursula's hand, reminding the mage that she needs to end the bloodline of the sun. Our heroine refuses, begging Arbanet to stop. She doesn't want this situation because they are punishing the innocent while blinded by revenge. She says doing this won't bring her sister back to life, but Arbanet screams that the sun had ended her life in the first place. She believes that his descendants all deserve to be punished. Ursula might have chosen to forget everything that happened, but Arbanet still recalls all the little details. The mage suddenly hugs the Grand Witch, begging her to leave this hellish swamp, which is what their sister would have wanted. Instead, Arbanet laughs in mockery because Ursula had said those words before. Our heroine is confused until the witch reveals that she has been to this gate during her past lives. Yet, she could never for once break down this cursed door. Ursula stands there stunned as the grinning witch calls her a fool. Since she had given everything to cast this curse, Ursula also has to risk everything to lift it. Arbanet disappears after those words, leaving Ursula behind to think about their meaning. She takes a look at her mana staff and soon understands what she needs to do. Our heroine has to sacrifice her very soul because it is the vessel that holds her mana. That is the only way to put an end to the curse. She feels a bit reluctant when she thinks of her past with Carlos, but knows she has to end everything herself. She apologizes one last time for trapping Carlos in this cycle and quickly stabs her staff into the gate. Immediately, the door cracks open, showering Ursula in a beam of light. Back at the palace, the coat of mud covering the mage suddenly begins to break. Immediately it shatters. The spirit of Arbanet is stunned. She calls Ursula a fool for risking her life for the one who betrayed her sister. Yet, the spirit has no choice but to fade away, and Carlos can feel that the curse has been lifted. He immediately rushes to Ursula's side, grabbing the mage before she falls to the ground. He calls her name several times in desperation before the girl finally opens her eyes. She smiles, happy to see Carlos's face for the last time before she dies. The Emperor becomes teary-eyed, hugging the mage to his chest and declaring his love for her. He is ready to give up everything in exchange to see the girl alive. Our heroine's body slowly begins to crack as she reveals that her real name is Arbonne. As Carlos slowly declares his love for Arbonne, a blinding light suddenly covers the mage. It seems a lifetime has passed when our heroine finally opens her eyes. She is surprised to find herself alive and lying on a familiar bed. She even hears the voice of a maid, and looking up, spots Jane and her teacher. The night reveals that Arbonne has been asleep for 2 days straight. She heads out to call the Emperor, leaving the teacher and student alone. The mage wants to know what happened, and Suzette explains that all the curses were broken, including the one Arbonne had placed on herself. Our heroine stares at the woman she had called her teacher, but who is actually her grandniece. During one of her past lives, the girl had been brought over to her and even had to call her grandaunt. She had only taken her in because, just like Ursula, Suzette could also see the future. Back then, the little child had promised to help Ursula find her true name. Our heroine had laughed, calling her bold, but who knew that Suzette would really fulfill her promise? Arbonne still finds it weird because even though the memories are fading, she still remembers calling the girl her master. Suzette assures her that it is normal for her memories to fade because she had just experienced the closest thing to rebirth. Her mana vessel had broken, so Suzette had to replace it with a tree branch she got from Gaia. She is happy because the curse on Arbonne was also lifted, which was why she was able to save her. Arbonne can't recall any curses, but before Suzette can explain, a happy Carlos bursts into the room. The couple happily share a hug, leaving Suzette to think about the curse. As long as a child of the sun abandons his greed and truly loves a child of the forest, the mage would regain all her powers. The couple refuse to let each other go, and even when a new day arrives, they are still spending time together in the garden. Carlos is still not used to Ursula's sudden name change, and truthfully, neither am I. He happily pulls off a flower, pleased that he can finally smell its scent. He places it on Arbonne's head, thanking her for breaking the curse. The naughty girl decides to play a prank on her lover, pouting and saying he doesn't need her anymore. She even mentions returning back to the village since all the contracts have been fulfilled. Carlos almost faints from shock when he hears that his lover might leave. Even when she blames herself for cursing the royal family, he insists that his bloodline was at fault. He finally admits that he doesn't want Arbonne to leave and begs the mage to stay with him. Our heroine bursts into laughter, amused that the king had fallen for her trick. She isn't willing to leave either because she had heard him confessing his love for her. But soon, Arbonne can't laugh anymore, as Carlos suddenly kneels before her. He reveals that his life had changed after meeting Arbonne, and he can't go back to a life without her. He slips a ring onto her finger, asking her to marry him if she feels the same way. The mage is stunned for a minute before she almost flies away in shock. She can't believe the king just proposed, and instead of courting, he straight away wants a marriage. She reminds him that he is the emperor, so his actions just now means he is choosing her as his empress. Carlos is fully aware and willing to make her his empress. He suddenly becomes nervous, worried that Arbonne might not want a future with him. The girl immediately says she isn't against it, and under Carlos's urging, she finally agrees to marry him. The happy emperor instantly lifts her up, making Ursula blush in surprise. He says she had scared him, but the grumpy girl points out that he had dumped her not long ago. Carlos immediately stops her, whining with a kiss that makes the mage turn red again. Meanwhile, the townspeople are startled when the papers reveal that Ursula is actually the Grand Witch Arbonne. They find it easy to accept, because only a Grand Witch like their saintess can use such powerful holy magic. But soon, another news drop that sends the Empire into more chaos. Even Arda can't keep his cool as he rushes to his brother's side to share the news. Arbonne is getting married to the Emperor. Perus isn't too surprised because he is currently holding their invitation. He is only amused because the king completely skipped the engagement ceremony. The nobles are also shocked by the sudden news about the king's marriage. Duke Keisha happily reminds the men that they had nagged Carlos to get married as soon as possible, and should be happy since he has fulfilled their request. Plus, his bride is not an ordinary woman and is actually the Grand Witch Arbonne. She is the Empire's star who founded the country along with the Sun King, and is basically an empress sent to them by God. Finally, the day of the wedding arrives. We see Jane dressed up for the first time, with Ursula's personal maid also by her side. Our heroine can't believe this is happening, and the maid teases that she didn't have much time to prepare for the wedding. Soon, Suzette arrives to walk Ursula down the aisle. We see the happy guests and an expectant Carlos waiting for his bride. He can't keep the smile out of his face as he reaches out to hold Arbonne's hand. The couple exchange their vows and share a kiss with a red face. Finally, they become husband and wife. Time passes by, and one day, a group of sparkling lights appear in Arbonne's room. The mage, after hearing their knock, happily opens the door. She greets her visitors from the fairy world, revealing how much she missed them. She has so much to tell them, and from her conversation, we learn that 5 years have passed since the wedding. Arbonne tells her visitors to be quiet as she sneaks them inside to see her family. Yes, family, because our heroine has given birth to a pair of twins. They are both sprawled across the bed with their father, Carlos, sleeping soundly. Arbonne shows off her twins, with the girl's name being Cesarella, while the boy is called Heathcliff. She becomes sad for a moment because she is living the life her sister dreamed of. She finally understands why Ursula said they looked good together. Her sister must have seen her future with Carlos and already knew everything back then. Arbonne becomes teary-eyed, saying she is living a fulfilled life just like Ursula wanted. She is certain that those words will reach her sister and mother. Finally, it is time for the visitors to leave, and even though it was very brief, the mage is still happy to see them. She expresses her eternity gratitude and says her final goodbyes. With a blessing of happiness, the story comes to a happy ending. Did you enjoy this? Then please subscribe to us for more. Until next time, ciao.